Hello there and welcome to Just About Earth, where curiosity takes a slow walk and science is less about heavy equations and more about gentle wandering. Tonight's thought experiment is one that sinks rather than soars. It invites us not to look at the stars or the horizon, but to turn our attention downward, beneath the soil, beneath the stone, and into the hidden spaces of the planet we call home. What if the very first civilization, not just a handful of people hiding from storms, but a society in the true sense, was not living on the surface at all? What if it was underground? The idea sounds like something from an old adventure novel, or perhaps the kind of tale you'd hear whispered late at night when lights are low and imaginations run high. And yet it's a question that sticks, isn't it? Because beneath our feet lies far more space than above our heads. We talk so often about the vastness of the sky, but the earth itself stretches downward into layers we rarely see. And within those layers, could it be possible that life, human life, organised and enduring, once made its home there? Before we sink into that line of thought, let me ask you something. Where are you listening from right now? Are you in a city apartment with the muffled sounds of traffic outside? Are you in a quiet house where the only noise is the hum of an appliance? Maybe you're lying somewhere dark already, eyes closed, letting words drift in and out. Wherever you are, picture this. Beneath you, not just rock and soil, but passageways, chambers, whole networks of space where footsteps once echoed, where torches once flickered, where voices carried in languages long forgotten. And if this wandering feels soothing, or perhaps just pleasantly distracting from the pace of the day, I'd be grateful if you pressed like, maybe subscribed, maybe shared this little pocket of calm with someone else. Because the more people who find these quiet journeys, the more we can keep making them. So let's begin, not with a claim of proof, but with curiosity. Because underground civilizations, whether real, imagined or symbolic, have always fascinated us. Think back to the first time you saw the entrance of a cave. Maybe not in person, but in a picture, or even in a cartoon. It feels different than a forest clearing or a beach. Caves call you inward. They feel like doors to another world, darker, quieter, almost timeless. And human beings have always answered that call. Tens of thousands of years ago, our ancestors didn't just use caves as temporary shelters. They decorated them. They painted walls deep inside with animals, symbols, and scenes of their lives. These weren't the acts of people simply hiding from rain. They were ceremonies of belonging. Underground was not just a place to wait for the weather to pass. It was a place that felt significant, almost sacred. And it wasn't just art. Early humans stored food in pits dug into the earth, kept water cool in stone chambers, and buried their dead beneath the ground. In a sense, our relationship with the underground is as old as civilization itself. We've always trusted it to hold things for us, our harvests, our memories, our ancestors. But what if, instead of merely storing and decorating, people decided to stay there? Not for a night, not for a season, but for generations. What if an entire community decided that the surface was unreliable and that the real promise of safety and stability lay beneath? Imagine waking not to sunlight, but to the glow of firelight against stone walls. Imagine growing up without a horizon, your sense of space measured in the width of a cavern, your sense of time measured by routines instead of dawn and dusk. For us, it feels unnatural, but for a community born and raised there, it would be normal. It would be home. This isn't as strange as it might sound. There are places in the world where people have already lived partly underground for centuries. In the deserts of Iran, entire towns once relied on underground aqueducts and storage spaces. In the region of Cappadocia in Turkey, vast underground cities have been discovered, carved into soft volcanic rock. Some were large enough to hold thousands of people. They weren't fantasy. They were real responses to danger, to climate, to war. But what if that wasn't just a later survival strategy? What if, from the very beginning, humanity's first attempt at civilization started there? not above. Think of the advantages: protection from weather, insulation from heat and cold, concealment from predators and hostile groups. The surface is exposed, unpredictable, and often dangerous. Underground, things change slowly, temperatures are stable, there's quiet, there's safety. For a group trying to survive long enough to become something more than scattered families, the Earth itself would have seemed like the best roof of all. Of course, this raises the practical question: food, water, energy. How would they manage? It's one thing to hide in caves, another to thrive there. But nature gives us examples that it's not impossible. Fungi grow without sunlight, feeding on decaying matter. Certain fish and insects live their entire lives in dark caverns. Bacteria flourish in deep underground environments, drawing energy from chemicals rather than light. Water trickles through cracks in rock, pooling in underground rivers and aquifers. If people learn to harness these resources, to cultivate fungi, to catch cavefish, to use fire not only for warmth but for cooking and light, they might have built an entire culture down there. Think of children raised in such an environment. For them, the sun would be a rumour, perhaps a frightening one. The sky, endless and open, might feel less safe than stone ceilings and predictable walls. Their myths might not tell of gods above, but of dangers lurking upward, waiting to punish anyone who strayed too close to the surface. And it's not only survival that could happen underground, it's culture. Voices carry differently in stone corridors. Music, chanting, ritual, all would echo and fill the air in ways that surface societies couldn't match. Their stories would be lit not by starlight, but by flickering torches, shadows dancing on walls like living illustrations. So why haven't we found undeniable evidence of such a civilization? Perhaps because evidence underground doesn't last the same way. Tunnels collapse, chambers flood, sediment buries and erases. Surface ruins can be uncovered by wind or sand or time. Underground ruins may be sealed forever, locked beneath rockfalls, indistinguishable from natural formations. If an entire society once thrived beneath us, the Earth itself may have hidden its traces, and yet the idea won't leave us. Again and again, myths and legends return to it. Stories of Agartha, of Shambhala, of the hollow earth, tales of hidden kingdoms of peace or of danger far below. Perhaps they are nothing more than human imagination, but the repetition across cultures suggests something deeper. Maybe it's not that there was a literal underground empire. Maybe it's that we all, at some level, feel the pull of the underground. We feel that life there is not only possible but in some ways inevitable. Even modern science feeds that sense. When researchers explore deep caves, they often find life where they expect none. Microbes surviving in darkness, strange insects adapted to total blackness, unique ecosystems thriving without sunlight. Every discovery seems to whisper the same thing. Life does not need the sky. It can make do with far less. And so, it isn't difficult to stretch the imagination one step further. Perhaps our first true civilization wasn't a cluster of huts under the sun, but a network of chambers beneath it. Perhaps our story doesn't begin with sky above us, but with stone all around us. There's a certain humility in that idea, isn't there? We tend to think of ourselves as creatures of light. We prize the stars, we build towers, we climb mountains. But maybe our beginnings were darker, quieter, more hidden. And if that's true, then even as we look outward, we're always carrying a little of that hidden past with us. This thought doesn't have to end here. It's not a conclusion, but an opening. We'll wander deeper into why humans imagine hidden worlds, how myths of underground realms have shaped us, and what science has uncovered about subterranean life. Because the question isn't only whether such a civilization existed, but why the idea continues to matter so much. If the idea of a civilization beneath our feet feels natural to imagine, it's worth pausing to ask why. Why do human beings keep inventing stories about hidden worlds, about realms that exist just out of sight, deep in caves or beneath mountains? Why is it easier for us to believe in the possibility of a lost city underground than, say, a lost city floating in the sky? It seems like our imagination has always had a special relationship with the spaces below us, a fascination that goes back as far as recorded history and probably much farther. Part of the answer is simple: the underground is mysterious. For most of human existence, the surface world was already dangerous enough, full of predators, storms, rival tribes, and unpredictable shifts in the environment. But at least the surface could be seen. The sky could be scanned for clouds, the horizon for movement. The underground, by contrast, was unknowable. You step into a cave and the light vanishes. Shadows swallow your sense of direction. A single turn can leave you disoriented. For early humans, this was not just unsettling, it was terrifying. And yet, fear often fuels imagination. When we can't see what's there, we fill the darkness with stories. Think about the first person who walked into a cave carrying nothing but a burning branch. Each flicker of flame would have revealed strange shapes on the walls, odd echoes bouncing back from the chamber, movements that might have been bats or simply illusions of shadow. It would have been natural to believe something lived in there, something unseen, something older and wiser, or perhaps more dangerous than the people who dared to intrude. From that fear and wonder, stories would grow, and stories are powerful. Once told, they stick. If you imagine spirits or gods in the depths, the cave becomes more than rock. It becomes a portal. It becomes the entrance to another world. Children hear those stories and repeat them. The idea spreads, reinforced not just by the mystery of caves, but by the feelings they provoke in every generation. Psychologists often point out that humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We don't like empty spaces in our knowledge. When we find gaps, we fill them with narrative. The underground is the ultimate gap. It hides everything from view. We can only see as far as the flame reaches. Beyond that, it's unknown, and the unknown rarely stays empty in the human mind. It becomes populated with imagined societies, monsters, ancestors, or divine beings. But it isn't only fear. The underground also promises something different: safety. We know from archaeological discoveries that caves offered shelter from storms, predators, and even enemy groups. A cave can be defended more easily than an open field. It's enclosed, stable, and predictable. This combination of fear and safety makes the underground strangely magnetic. It's both threatening and comforting, both a place of dread and a place of refuge. No wonder our imagination lingers there. Cultures around the world have created myths that describe entire worlds beneath the surface. In Greek mythology, the underworld wasn't just a gloomy pit, but an organised realm with rulers, rivers and regions. The Mayans told stories of Xibalba, a vast subterranean domain where trials awaited the souls of the dead. In Norse traditions, there were hidden worlds beneath the roots of the world tree. In Buddhist and Hindu legends, there are references to Agartha or Shambhala, cities of wisdom hidden beneath mountains, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. These stories vary in detail, but the theme is constant. The underground is not empty. It's full of meaning. The question is why human minds across such different geographies and eras would converge on such similar ideas. Some scholars argue it's simply a reflection of burial practices. When we bury our dead, we create an association between underground and afterlife. The earth receives the body, so it must also be the gateway to something beyond. Once that link is made, it becomes fertile ground for myth-making. The underground isn't just where bodies rest, it's where souls travel, where gods live, where civilizations might thrive away from our sight. But perhaps there's more to it. When you live entirely exposed to the elements, the thought of a stable, hidden place is appealing. If you've lost crops to storms or seen predators attack from the open, the fantasy of a safe, enclosed world beneath you is comforting. Myths of hidden worlds could be less about death and more about longing for security. They may be collective expressions of the wish to retreat from chaos and live in a place where dangers can't reach. There's also the matter of discovery. Human history is full of moments when people stumbled across caves filled with strange formations, stalactites and stalagmites that look like frozen waterfalls, minerals glittering in the light, chambers so large they resemble cathedrals. Imagine walking into such a place without any scientific framework to explain it. It would feel otherworldly. Of course you'd believe it was the work of gods or the home of beings unlike yourself. Entire imagined civilizations could grow out of that one experience. And then there's memory. Many cultures pass stories orally, reshaping them with each generation. A story of hiding in caves during a storm could become, over centuries, a story of ancestors who lived entirely underground. Small truths expand into myths. Eventually, they take on lives of their own, no longer tied to the practical event that sparked them. By the time they reach us, they carry themes of hidden kingdoms and mysterious peoples, far removed from the original context. Modern psychology adds another layer to this. We are drawn to dualities. We like to imagine opposites, light and dark, heaven and hell, surface and underground. These contrasts help us organise the world in our minds. When we think of the sky as the realm of gods or ancestors, we naturally balance it with an underworld. One realm above, one below. This symmetry appeals to our sense of order. So even if no civilization ever truly lived underground, the idea serves a symbolic role. It balances the stories we tell about existence. Consider too the role of children's imagination. Children often dream up secret places, forts, hideouts, dens, tunnels. The underground naturally becomes a canvas for these fantasies. Even in play, we seem inclined to imagine what it would be like to live beneath. Perhaps this instinct in childhood is a faint echo of something older, a survival trait passed down from ancestors who found safety below. We also can't ignore the role of literature and later science fiction. From Jules Verne's Journey to the Centre of the Earth to modern films and video games, we've continued to feed the idea that the underground is not empty but populated. Every new story adds another layer to our cultural imagination. By now, the underground civilization has become almost a genre of its own, a recurring motif that we recognise even if we don't believe it literally. But belief is a slippery thing. While many people dismiss Hollow Earth theories or myths of Agartha as fanciful, they still linger. They still attract interest. Maybe that's because deep down, we know how little we've actually explored below us. We've mapped the surface of Mars more thoroughly than the deepest caves of our own planet. When so much remains unseen, imagination fills the gaps. Hidden worlds remain possible, if not probable. Geology also plays a role in sustaining these ideas. Sinkholes appear suddenly, swallowing buildings and roads. Lava tubes stretch for miles, forming ready-made tunnels. Underground rivers carve passages that humans stumble upon only by chance. Every time we discover such a feature, it feels like a reminder that the Earth is full of surprises, that there could always be more hiding beneath. In that sense, myths of hidden civilizations are not entirely irrational. They're extensions of real experiences of finding vast, unexpected spaces underground. Another reason we imagine hidden worlds is the human attraction to secrecy. We're fascinated by the thought of something existing right beside us, unnoticed. It's the same impulse that makes secret passages in castles or hidden rooms in houses so compelling. The underground is the ultimate secret. It lies literally underfoot, ignored in daily life, yet vast enough to conceal almost anything. To imagine a civilization there is to indulge in the fantasy of secrets on the grandest scale. Let's not forget how the underground shapes our emotions. Spend a few minutes in a dark cave and your mind begins to play tricks. Sounds echo strangely. Time feels different. Without the sun, you lose track of hours. This distortion of perception makes caves feel like separate realities. When you emerge again into the light, it's like crossing between worlds. It doesn't take much to imagine that someone could stay on the other side, never returning, building a world that feels utterly distinct. Even language reflects our fascination. We speak of going underground when hiding. We call secret movements underground. We describe hidden culture as an underground scene. The metaphor is everywhere. It shows that we instinctively associate what is hidden, different, or alternative with what is beneath. This constant association only strengthens the appeal of imagining full societies living below. So why do we imagine hidden worlds? Because they satisfy multiple needs at once. They explain mysteries, they provide comfort, they balance our symbolic maps of the universe, they feed our longing for secrets, and they remind us of the strangeness that still exists in the earth. Even if we never find proof of an ancient subterranean civilization, the fact that so many cultures have imagined one says something profound about us. We are creatures who need to believe that there's more than meets the eye, that the world holds layers beyond what is visible. And perhaps, just perhaps, those stories are not entirely wrong, because even if the underground isn't hiding a forgotten city, it does hide countless forms of life we've barely begun to understand. In that sense, our imagination of hidden worlds is always justified. Beneath our feet, there really are worlds we haven't yet seen. There is something about caves and darkness that pulls us in, even when part of us wants to step back. It's not a simple attraction. It's mixed with fear, curiosity, and a sense of strangeness that few other environments create. People can walk into a forest and feel wonder, or stand by the sea and feel awe, but stepping into a cave is different. The moment you leave daylight behind, your senses change. Sight becomes limited. Sound takes on new weight. Every drip of water echoes. Every shift of air feels alive. It's as though the cave itself is watching, listening, waiting. That is part of the allure. For our ancestors, caves were both sanctuary and challenge. They offered protection from weather and predators, but also presented risks. You could get lost, injured, trapped, and yet people kept returning. Some of the oldest art we know of was painted deep inside caves. Imagine what that meant. It wasn't simply decoration for the places where people lived. These were dangerous journeys requiring fire, preparation and cooperation, all for the sake of leaving images on walls far from daylight. The effort suggests that caves had meaning beyond the practical. They were places of significance, places where the ordinary rules of life above ground did not fully apply. Darkness itself has always shaped our imagination. Without light, the brain works differently. Vision, our dominant sense, loses reliability. The mind fills gaps with possibilities. In total darkness, you can imagine shapes that aren't there. Hear sounds that have no source, feel watched when you're alone. This doesn't happen only in ancient caves. Even today, people who spend time in deep darkness report strange sensations, distorted perception of time, and even mild hallucinations. The brain does not like the absence of input. It compensates by creating its own. And so, caves become natural stages for stories of spirits, monsters, and hidden civilizations. But the allure is not only about fear or distortion. Caves offer something soothing as well. They are quiet. The chaos of the surface, wind, rain, predators, rival tribes, falls away. Inside a cave there is consistency. Temperature stays stable. The walls feel protective. Firelight can be controlled. For a group seeking order in an unpredictable world, this stability would have been priceless. Caves are paradoxical in that sense. Frightening and comforting. Disorienting and grounding. That paradox is what makes them so compelling. Psychologists might call this the edge effect. Humans are drawn to boundaries, places where one world shifts into another. A shoreline where land meets sea always feels special. A forest edge where open field becomes shadowed woods draws attention. Caves are another edge, perhaps the most dramatic one. They are the threshold between light and darkness, safety and danger, known and unknown. Standing at the entrance, we feel both impulses at once, the pull to go deeper and the urge to turn back. There is also something symbolic about caves. Across cultures, they have been linked to rebirth. Emerging from a cave can feel like emerging from a womb. Some myths describe heroes being born in caves or undergoing transformations there. Darkness becomes not just absence of light, but a necessary stage in a journey. You go in, you change, you come out different. This symbolic layer may be part of why caves have continued to capture imagination long after they stopped being practical shelters. The physical beauty of caves adds another layer to the allure. Stalactites and stalagmites, formed drop by drop over thousands of years, create landscapes unlike anything on the surface. Mineral deposits glow under torchlight. Underground rivers carve chambers that look like cathedrals. When early humans saw these things, they must have felt awe, the same awe we feel when we enter a vast cavern today. Such beauty in a place so hidden reinforces the idea that caves are more than geological features. They feel like secret worlds, revealed only to those willing to step into darkness. Even animals add to the mystery. Bats, blind fish, insects adapted to total darkness. These creatures seem like residents of another planet. For people who didn't have scientific explanations, their existence would have been uncanny. How could something live without light? How could fish have no eyes? The underground world seemed to operate by different rules. If life could adapt so strangely here, then surely whole societies could as well. And then there is time. In caves, time feels altered. Without daylight, there are no natural markers. An hour can feel like minutes or stretch endlessly. The silence, the steady drip of water, the constancy of stone, all combine to create a sense that time has slowed or even stopped. This timelessness adds to the sense of otherworldliness. It is easy to imagine that a cave is a place apart where ordinary history does not apply, where civilizations could exist outside the flow of surface time. In modern times, we still feel this allure. People travel to explore caves, not just for science, but for adventure. Spelunking, caving, underground tourism, all feed the same impulse. We want to see what lies beyond the light, even if it frightens us. Entire communities of enthusiasts dedicate themselves to mapping caves, documenting them, and sometimes risking their lives to go deeper than anyone has gone before. And while they rarely find anything unexpected beyond rock, water, and air, the possibility lingers. Maybe the next chamber will hold something different. Maybe the next tunnel will reveal a secret world. The allure of caves and darkness also explains why so many myths of hidden civilizations place them underground rather than above. We know what the sky looks like. It's vast, open, and has been visible to everyone across history. It holds mystery, yes, but not secrecy. The underground, by contrast, can truly hide things. You can walk above a chamber without knowing it's there. You can live your whole life on the surface without realizing there are networks beneath you. This capacity for secrecy makes the underground the perfect canvas for imagination. Even today, our language reflects the allure. We speak of going into the depths when searching for knowledge. We call hidden thoughts buried. We describe confronting fears as going into the dark. These phrases show how deeply caves and darkness are embedded in our minds, not just as physical spaces but as metaphors for the unknown parts of ourselves. Perhaps the allure also lies in contrast. We live much of our lives in light. The sun rises and sets. Artificial lights extend our days. Cities glow through the night. Darkness, true darkness, is rare. Caves remind us what it feels like to be without light. They force us to notice sounds, touch, and our own breathing. They strip away distractions. For some, that is terrifying. For others, it is grounding. Either way, it makes the experience unforgettable. In a way, caves are mirrors. They reflect back to us our own imagination, our own fears, our own longings. When we step inside, we bring with us our stories, and the cave gives them shape. A drip becomes a heartbeat, a shadow becomes a figure, an echo becomes a voice, and soon the cave is no longer just rock, it is alive with meaning. This is why the idea of a civilization underground feels plausible in imagination, even if it isn't supported by evidence. Caves already feel like places where other realities could exist. They invite us to believe that something more is there, waiting, hidden. When stories describe vast kingdoms beneath mountains or wise societies in hidden caverns, they are building on that natural sense of allure. The darkness itself may be the strongest part of this. Darkness strips away detail, but in doing so, it gives the mind freedom. When you can't see what's there, you can imagine anything. Darkness is not empty. It is full of possibility. And that possibility is endlessly compelling. When people across history tried to explain the mysteries of the world, they often looked upward to the stars, but just as often they looked downward into the earth itself. The ground beneath their feet wasn't only soil and stone, it was the threshold to other realms. In the ancient imagination, caves were not empty hollows. They were doorways, passages, entire kingdoms hidden beneath. And out of this sense grew some of the most enduring myths humanity has ever told. Myths of underground realms that held gods, spirits, and sometimes entire civilizations. Take the Greeks, for instance. Their stories of the underworld weren't vague whispers, but detailed geographies. Hades was not simply darkness. It was organized, mapped in myth with rivers like Styx and Lethe, ferrymen like Charon, judges who weighed the fate of souls, and even regions divided for punishment or peace. When Greeks stepped into caves, many believed they were literally standing at the edges of this world. Some sites, like the Necromantion of Epirus, were treated as entrances where mortals could attempt to speak with the dead. These were not symbolic journeys in the minds of the people. They were real thresholds, physical points where the realm of the living brushed against the underground realm of spirits. The Romans inherited and expanded these ideas. They too believed in portals, in sacred caves that led to the kingdom of the dead. The Mundus Cereris, a pit in the Roman Forum, was opened only on certain days of the year, believed to allow spirits to pass between worlds. It was a ritual reminder that beneath the city, beneath all the noise and order of empire, there was another domain quietly existing, powerful and invisible. Move across the world to the Maya, and you'll find Xibalba, the fearsome underworld ruled by death gods and spirits who delighted in trickery. Their myths tell of heroes descending into this hidden place, facing trials of darkness, cold, jaguars and fire. Caves in Mayan lands were seen as literal mouths of Xibalba, openings into a realm as structured and vivid as the villages above. Archaeological evidence supports this belief. Many caves in Central America contain offerings, carvings, and signs of ritual activity. The people were not simply using caves as storage. They were interacting with what they believed were the very gates to another world. In Norse traditions, the underground was just as significant. The Great World Tree, Yggdrasil, was imagined with roots extending deep below, into realms of frost, serpents, and ancestors. Niflheim, the world of mist and cold, lay beneath, a place of ancient forces. The idea of downwards travel wasn't metaphorical. It was the balance of the cosmos. Gods lived above, humans in the middle, and other powers beneath, all connected through the tree. The earth wasn't a flat stage. It was layered, and each layer had its own society. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, we encounter myths of Agartha or Shambhala, realms hidden beneath mountains, sometimes within the earth itself. These were not dark pits of punishment, but places of wisdom, peace, and advanced knowledge. The underground here was not hellish, but utopian. Seekers believed that one day these hidden civilizations might reveal themselves to the surface world. bringing balance and enlightenment. And in some legends, only the pure of heart could find their way in, suggesting that these places were not only hidden physically but morally, accessible only to those who deserved them. Native American traditions also carry echoes of underground origins. Many tribes tell stories of ancestors emerging from beneath the earth to live on the surface. The Hopi, for instance, describe earlier worlds below, each destroyed or transformed, with people climbing upward through openings until reaching the current world. In this view, underground isn't just where souls go after death, it's where humanity itself came from, a womb of stone and darkness that gave birth to life above. In China, Taoist and Buddhist texts sometimes speak of hidden kingdoms within mountains, paradises protected from the chaos of the surface world. These realms too were imagined as underground or inside the earth, shielded from time and corruption. The underground becomes not only a place of death or danger, but also of preservation, a storehouse of wisdom waiting for the right moment. What's striking is that these myths, though separated by geography and culture, all share certain themes. They imagine the underground as populated, not barren, not empty, but filled with beings, societies, forces and rules. They imagine entrances that humans can stumble upon, often in caves, sinkholes or sacred pits. And they treat these entrances as significant, worthy of ritual, fear or longing. Some myths emphasize punishment and fear, others emphasize wisdom and safety. But in both cases, the underground is meaningful. It is the other side of existence, a place that mirrors the surface world but operates by different laws. Why would so many cultures converge on this idea? Part of it may come from burial. When the dead are placed in the ground, it is natural to imagine they continue in some way below. Part of it may come from the practical use of caves for shelter and ritual, which created associations between underground and sacredness. And part of it may come from the sheer mystery of darkness. Once a story is told of what lies below, it becomes believable because no one can easily disprove it. You can't see far enough into a cave to say with certainty that nothing is there. The endurance of these myths suggests that underground realms filled a deep need in human storytelling. They explained death, offered hope, or provided warnings. They gave structure to chaos. They helped people place themselves in a universe that felt layered, complex, and full of unseen powers. Even today, echoes of these myths remain. People still tell stories of Hollow Earth, of lost civilizations waiting beneath the surface. Conspiracy theories and fringe beliefs about tunnels, secret cities, and hidden powers are modern versions of ancient myths. They draw from the same source, the feeling that the Earth itself is not silent but alive with secrets. What's also fascinating is how these myths often portray underground civilizations as either more advanced or more primal than surface life. Sometimes they are utopias, with knowledge and peace beyond our reach. Sometimes they are places of horror, where spirits torment and darkness devours. Rarely are they imagined as simply ordinary. The underground is always extreme, either in wisdom or in danger. This extremity reflects the emotional intensity of caves themselves. They don't feel neutral. They feel charged, as though stepping inside commits you to a story larger than yourself. When you piece all of these myths together, a pattern emerges. The underground is never just geology. It is a mirror of our fears, our hopes, and our questions. It is a place to put what we cannot explain. Civilizations living beneath us, whether as gods, spirits, or ancestors, are ways of acknowledging that the world is larger than we can see, that there are layers of existence beyond our ordinary experience. And in imagining these realms, ancient people were not so different from us. They were asking the same question we ask tonight. What if life, organized and meaningful life, exists beneath the ground? When people talk about hidden civilizations underground, a few names rise to the surface again and again. Shambhala, Agartha, and the Hollow Earth. These are more than passing myths. They have become anchors for entire traditions of storytelling, belief, and speculation. Each has been shaped and reshaped across centuries, weaving together threads of religion, folklore, and even pseudoscience. And together, they show us just how much the human imagination is willing to dig below the ground in search of something larger than ourselves. Shambhala is perhaps the most famous of the three. In Buddhist tradition, it is described as a hidden kingdom of peace and wisdom, somewhere beyond ordinary maps. Not a place of punishment or torment, but a place of enlightenment. In some versions, it is said to be hidden in the Himalayas, shielded from the eyes of the unworthy. In others, it exists in a space that is both physical and spiritual, accessible only when the world is ready. The earliest mentions appear in the Kalachakra Tantra, an important text in Tibetan Buddhism. Shambhala is not merely a legend there. It is treated as a real realm, one that plays a role in the unfolding of history. One prophecy even says that in a future age, when the world is overcome by greed and chaos, the people of Shambhala will emerge to restore balance. What makes Shambhala compelling is how it blends the idea of a hidden world with moral significance. It isn't just hidden geographically, it's hidden ethically. Only those prepared spiritually can reach it. This makes it less like a lost city to stumble upon, and more like a state of readiness. But for listeners across history, it's been easy to imagine it physically as well. Explorers in the Himalayas have sometimes been asked if they were searching for Shambhala. Stories of lamas pointing to distant peaks and suggesting that secret valleys held the kingdom have persisted for centuries. Even Western writers, during the wave of fascination with Eastern philosophy in the 19th and 20th centuries, seized on the idea. Novels, films, and spiritual movements began referencing Shambhala as though it were both an actual place and a metaphor for human potential. Agartha is a related but distinct legend. Often confused or blended with Shambhala, Agartha is said to be an underground realm connected by tunnels that span the entire globe. In some stories, its capital is Shambhala, making the two names part of the same myth. In others, Agartha is separate, a hidden network where advanced beings live in peace, occasionally guiding or influencing surface humanity. Interest in Agartha surged in the late 19th century, when occult writers in Europe began describing it as a vast underground kingdom inhabited by enlightened masters. They suggested that these beings preserved ancient wisdom from lost civilizations, perhaps even from Atlantis or Lemuria, and that they occasionally allowed surface dwellers glimpses of their knowledge. In these stories, Agartha becomes a utopia beneath our feet. Not just one hidden valley, but an entire world carefully shielded from the violence and disorder of the surface. Writers described it in elaborate detail, glowing with its own inner light, powered by unknown energies, populated by beings who had transcended ordinary human limitations. For people living through the upheavals of industrialization and war, the idea of such a place was deeply appealing. It offered hope that somewhere, untouched by greed and conflict, wisdom endured. Then there is the hollow earth theory, which takes these myths and stretches them into something even grander. Rather than imagining hidden kingdoms in isolated caverns or tunnels, hollow earth theory suggests that the entire planet is hollow inside, with vast spaces, perhaps even oceans and continents, existing below the crust. In some versions, a small inner sun lights this inner world, creating conditions where life could thrive. In others, the interior is connected to the surface by great openings at the poles. The idea of a hollow earth is not new. It appeared in Western science as early as the 17th century, when the astronomer Edmund Halley, better known for the comet that bears his name, suggested that the Earth might be composed of multiple concentric shells. Halley was trying to explain unusual compass readings, and though his proposal was scientific speculation rather than myth, it opened the door to later imaginings. In the 19th century, writers and explorers seized on the concept. Novels like Jules Verne's Journey to the Centre of the Earth made the hollow earth vivid in popular culture. And in the centuries since, fringe theorists have kept the idea alive. insisting that governments or scientists are hiding evidence of openings at the poles, or that strange phenomena like unexplained lights in the sky prove the presence of inner worlds. For those who believe Shambhala and Agartha are not just metaphors but actual societies within this hollow earth, in these accounts the legends and the theory merge. The hollow earth is the geography, and Agartha or Shambhala are the civilizations within it. Sometimes the inhabitants are described as advanced humans, other times as entirely different beings, giants, spiritual masters, or survivors of ancient cataclysms who retreated below. Skeptics point out, of course, that geology rules out a hollow earth. Seismic data shows that our planet has layers: crust, mantle, outer core and inner core. There is no room for vast empty spaces, but the lack of scientific plausibility has never erased the appeal. Myths are not bound by physics, they are bound by what resonates with human hopes and fears. And what resonates here is the dream of hidden perfection. The surface world is chaotic, violent, unpredictable. But maybe, just maybe, there is a place beneath it all where order and wisdom prevail. Maybe the real history of humanity is being quietly guarded underground, waiting for the right time to re-emerge. This is the promise of Shambhala, Agartha, and the Hollow. That we are not alone, that the world is layered with secrets, that life is larger than we can see. It's worth noticing how these legends adapt to the needs of their time. In ancient Tibet, Shambhala served as a spiritual anchor, a reminder that enlightenment was possible even in an age of turmoil. In 19th century Europe, Agartha reflected fascination with lost civilizations and esoteric wisdom. In modern conspiracy culture, the Hollow Earth provides an endless canvas for suspicions about government secrecy or alien influence. Each version changes the details, but the core idea remains the same. There is more beneath us than stone. Part of their endurance comes from geography itself. Mountains like the Himalayas are filled with hidden valleys and caves, many unexplored. The Earth's crust really does contain networks of tunnels, lava tubes, and caverns stretching for miles. Even though we know they are formed by natural processes, they still feel like evidence that the Earth has room for more. When someone hears of a cave that stretches beyond what's been mapped, it isn't hard to imagine that it might connect to something larger, something secret. Stories of explorers stumbling upon entrances to these worlds only reinforce the myth. Tales circulate of lost adventurers, mysterious maps, and expeditions that vanished. Whether true or invented, they give weight to the feeling that these places could exist. After all, how much of the Earth's interior have we really seen? We've dug mines and drilled deep, but we've barely scratched the surface compared to the planet's full depth. The unknown leaves space for belief. And so Shambhala, Agartha, and the Hollow Earth live on, not as proven realities, but as living stories. They give us ways to imagine perfection, secrecy, wisdom, and mystery all at once. They let us believe that humanity has not yet uncovered everything, that just out of reach there are societies better than our own, preserved in stone and shadow. Whether we see them as myths, metaphors, or possibilities, they continue to shape how we think about what lies beneath. They remind us that our fascination with underground civilizations is not just a modern curiosity, but a long thread running through cultures across the globe. And when we ask tonight what it would mean if the first civilization lived underground, we are tapping into the same current of imagination. We're not inventing something new, we're joining a conversation that has been going on for centuries, carried by monks, storytellers, explorers, and dreamers. And in that sense, the legends of Shambhala, Agartha, and the Hollow Earth are not only about what might be hidden below, but about the continuity of human imagination itself. To imagine a civilization living underground, we have to ask one of the most basic questions of all. Could life, human life, work without sunlight? The sun is so much a part of our existence that it feels inseparable from survival. We wake with it, measure our days by it, and depend on it to grow food. Yet if we look closely, we find that life without sunlight is not only possible, it is already happening in places we rarely notice. The world beneath us is full of examples that show how life adapts even in total darkness. The first challenge, of course, is food. Plants on the surface rely on photosynthesis, converting sunlight into energy. Take away the sun, and the familiar chain of life collapses. But not all life follows this pattern. In caves, fungi and bacteria thrive without photosynthesis, feeding instead on decaying organic matter carried in by water or animals. Some bacteria even survive on chemical energy alone, drawing nutrients from the minerals in rock. Entire ecosystems have been found kilometers beneath the surface, supported not by sunlight, but by chemosynthesis, the process of using chemical reactions to create energy. In the deep ocean, around hydrothermal vents, life flourishes in complete darkness. Giant tube worms, crabs, and strange fish live off the energy released from chemicals in the water. These ecosystems show us that life doesn't need the sun at all. It only needs a source of energy and ways to use it. If nature can build entire communities of creatures in those conditions, it isn't so hard to imagine humans finding ways to adapt too. Humans, of course, can't live on minerals or bacteria alone. But if the earliest people underground learned to cultivate fungi, raise insects, or domesticate cave-adapted animals, they could build a food system independent of sunlight. Mushrooms already grow in darkness, thriving on compost, wood, or soil. Insects such as crickets and beetles can feed on organic scraps and provide protein. Fish in underground rivers or lakes could be caught and even bred. It would not look like surface agriculture, with fields of grain and herds of cattle. It would be smaller, stranger, more fragile, but it would work. Water would be another question, yet the underground is not dry. Aquifers, underground rivers, and drip-fed pools are common in caves. Early civilizations could have collected and stored this water, using natural systems to filter it. In fact, many ancient surface societies already relied on underground channels, such as qanats in Persia, to bring water to their fields. The knowledge of underground water is as old as civilization itself. Light is trickier. Fire provides warmth and illumination, but smoke in enclosed spaces is dangerous. Yet we know that ancient people were resourceful. Caves in France still hold soot marks from torches carried by early artists, proving that they had methods of lighting deep chambers without suffocating. If an underground society developed further, they might have discovered ways to vent smoke through natural cracks or design chambers where airflow carried it away. Over time, they could have relied less on fire and more on glowing materials. Some minerals fluoresce under the right conditions. Some fungi emit faint light. Bioluminescent insects and fish exist even now. It isn't impossible that humans living underground could have domesticated or cultivated such sources of natural light. Then comes the question of health. Without sunlight, humans lose access to vitamin D, essential for bones and overall well-being. But this too has solutions. Vitamin D can be gained from certain foods like fish, eggs, and mushrooms. Perhaps underground societies leaned heavily on these, and over generations their bodies might have adapted to the lack of sunlight, changing skin tone, metabolism, and even physiology to suit their environment. Science has already documented how animals in caves lose pigmentation, shrink their eyes, and adapt to chemical energy. Humans would change more slowly, but given enough time, they too might develop traits suited for life in darkness. What about the mind? Light shapes our sense of time. Without it, our circadian rhythms drift. Experiments with people living in caves today show that sleep cycles can stretch or shrink without sunlight to anchor them. But in a society that lives entirely underground, these rhythms might adjust differently. Instead of following a 24-hour cycle, people could organise their lives around work, meals and rest, unmoored from the sun's influence. clocks or routines could replace natural cues. In some ways, it might even feel freeing, a chance to shape time as they wished. Of course, the challenges would not end there. Agriculture on the surface produces surplus food, allowing large populations. Underground systems would be harder to scale. But civilizations don't have to look like ours to exist. A smaller, more tightly knit community could thrive underground, sustained by careful balance and deep knowledge of their environment. The psychological effects of darkness might be profound. Humans are drawn to light, to open space. Living underground could feel claustrophobic, isolating. But for those born into it, darkness would be normal. Children who had never seen the sun might not miss it. Instead, they would see safety in the stone walls, comfort in the predictable environment, community in the enclosed spaces. Their myths might warn of the surface as dangerous, chaotic, even cursed. The underground, in their view, would be the true home. What's interesting is that modern technology makes such an idea seem less far-fetched. People have built underground bunkers, subway systems, and even cities designed to withstand disasters. In places like Montreal or Helsinki, underground networks of shops and homes already exist, shielding people from extreme weather. If we can do this now with limited resources, it isn't impossible that ancient societies found simpler but effective ways to live below. And when we consider that Earth itself offers so much space underground, the idea feels almost natural. Caves stretch for miles. Lava tubes can be wide enough to fit entire buildings. Some sinkholes open into chambers the size of stadiums. Multiply that across the globe, and you have countless places where life could hide. So, could life without sunlight work? The evidence suggests yes. Not easily, not without adaptation and creativity, but yes. Fungi, insects, fish and bacteria prove that ecosystems thrive in darkness. Ancient people proved that caves could be used for art, ritual and survival. Modern examples prove that underground living is possible with planning. Put these together, and the picture emerges of a world where human civilization could indeed root itself beneath the ground, away from the sun, away from the surface, quietly sustaining itself for generations. And if that happened, we might never know, because an underground civilization, if it managed to endure, would leave few traces on the surface. It could remain hidden, its history sealed in stone, its stories told only by those who lived it. If we want to imagine people living underground, the first step is to look at what nature is already doing down there. Because long before humans thought about building tunnels or carving chambers, the underground was full of life. In fact, it might be fair to say that the majority of Earth's living space is hidden beneath our feet. The soil, the rock, the water-filled pockets, the deep crust. These are habitats we don't often think about, but they're teeming with creatures that have already proven survival. In darkness is not only possible but successful. Start with something as ordinary as soil. Scoop up a handful and you're holding an entire ecosystem. Bacteria, fungi, nematodes, mites, tiny insects, all living, eating, reproducing and dying in a world invisible to the eye. Billions of organisms can live in a single handful of Earth. They break down organic matter, recycle nutrients, and keep the system running. This is already a reminder that sunlight, while important above, isn't the only fuel below. The energy stored in plants, dead animals, and minerals trickles downward, feeding layer after layer of life. Go deeper, into caves, and you find even stranger communities. Some are entirely cut off from the surface. Isolated for millions of years, they have evolved in directions we would never expect. Blind fish that navigate with sensors on their skin. Insects without wings that rely on touch and vibration. Albino crabs that feed on bacteria instead of plants. Entire food chains that never see the sun. One famous example is the Moval Cave in Romania. Sealed off for around 5 million years, it contains an ecosystem unlike anywhere else. The air is thick with hydrogen sulfide, toxic to most surface creatures, But bacteria there use chemicals, not light, to create energy. Those bacteria become the base of the food chain, feeding worms, spiders, and other creatures that have adapted to this alien environment. It's a working ecosystem, complete and self-sustaining, without a single ray of sunlight. And Muval is not unique. Deep in the ocean, around hydrothermal vents, life thrives where light never reaches. Here too, bacteria use chemical energy to create food. Giant tube worms, clams, crabs, and fish cluster around the vents, forming communities so rich that scientists were stunned when they were first discovered. They showed that sunlight is not the universal rule of life. Where there is energy, life will find a way to use it. Even deeper, in the cracks of Earth's crust, life has been found. Bacteria and archaea, single-celled organisms, live kilometers below the surface, feeding on minerals, surviving extreme pressure and heat. Some of these microbes are so slow-growing that their life cycles stretch into thousands of years. They are not the bustling societies of the surface, but they are proof that life exists where we once thought it impossible. And it isn't only small creatures. Larger animals have also adapted to underground life. Bats spend their days in caves, emerging only to feed at night. Moles and naked mole rats live almost entirely below the surface, building elaborate tunnel systems, raising their young in darkness. Salamanders live in underground pools, some species so specialized that they never develop eyes at all. These examples remind us that living underground doesn't have to be temporary. It can be a full lifestyle, passed down generation to generation. Plants too, in a sense, rely on underground strategies. Their roots reach deep into soil, forming vast networks. Fungi connect those roots in what scientists call the wood wide web, trading nutrients and information. Though the green leaves above depend on sunlight, much of the plant's real work happens below, hidden from view. This networked subterranean life supports entire forests, demonstrating again that the underground is not barren but foundational. What all of this shows us is that nature already thrives in conditions similar to what we imagine for underground civilizations. Limited light, strange energy sources, isolated ecosystems. These are challenges that life has already solved many times. If blind fish can navigate caves and bacteria can survive kilometers beneath the crust, it doesn't seem unreasonable that humans, with creativity and culture, could also adapt. Consider too how resilient underground life is. Surface ecosystems can be destroyed by storms, fires, or droughts. Underground systems are more stable. They change slowly, buffered from weather, and even some natural disasters. This stability may be part of why myths of hidden civilizations feel plausible. If there is anywhere life could endure quietly for centuries without our notice, it is underground. Another fascinating aspect is how underground life changes our perception of scale. On the surface, we think of forests and oceans as the big players. Underground, the big players are microbes. They outnumber and outweigh all other forms of life. By some estimates, the total mass of microbes beneath the surface is greater than all plants and animals combined. In other words, the underground is not a fringe environment, it is the main stage for life on Earth. And we are only beginning to understand it. Scientists drilling deep boreholes have discovered microbes in rock layers kilometers below. Some are alive but barely active, slow to a pace we can hardly imagine. Others form communities feeding off trace chemicals. We call this the deep biosphere, and it is one of the least explored regions of the planet. What little we've found suggests it is immense, diverse and persistent. This makes the idea of underground civilizations feel less like fantasy and more like a question of scale. If microbes and small animals already live in hidden worlds below, why not larger beings? Why not humans, given the right adaptations? Nature has already built the model. We would only be another variation. And when you think about it, humans have been mimicking this pattern for a long time. We've built root cellars to preserve food, carved underground dwellings into cliffs, constructed tunnels for travel, and mined deep for resources. Each step has been a way of borrowing strategies that nature already uses. Even our modern underground spaces, subways, bunkers, storage facilities, mirror the resilience and insulation of natural underground systems. The more we learn about how nature thrives below us, the more the imagination of an underground civilization feels like an extension rather than an invention. Life doesn't need sunlight. It needs energy, stability, and adaptation. Those are available in abundance beneath the surface. Perhaps this is why myths of underground realms persist, because in a sense they are already true. There are realms beneath us, full of life, full of adaptation, full of mystery. They may not be human kingdoms with streets and palaces, but they are kingdoms of their own kind, invisible but vast. And once you accept that, the leap to imagining human societies among them becomes smaller. The precedent is already there. The underground is alive. It has always been alive. And maybe, just maybe, it has been home to more than microbes and fish. Maybe it has been home to us as well, in ways we have forgotten. To imagine a civilization beneath the surface, it helps to understand the science of the ecosystems that already exist underground. These ecosystems are different from the forests, oceans, and plains we're used to. They're quieter, slower, stranger. And yet they follow rules, intricate and consistent, that scientists are only beginning to map. When we look closely, we see that subterranean ecosystems have everything a society might need: energy, water, stability, and a web of life that functions without sunlight. The first thing to understand is that most subterranean ecosystems are driven not by light, but by chemistry. On the surface, photosynthesis dominates. Plants capture energy from the sun and pass it through food chains. Underground, there is no sun, so life relies on chemosynthesis instead. Microbes feed on chemical energy, hydrogen sulfide, methane, iron, or other minerals, and form the foundation of food webs. In some caves, bacteria grow in thick mats, feeding insects, which in turn feed spiders, beetles, or fish. These systems look fragile, but they endure for millions of years, fueled by steady chemical reactions that never stop. Hydrology plays a central role as well. Water moves underground in ways that shape ecosystems. Aquifers carry not just water, but nutrients, minerals, and microbes. Underground rivers carve passageways, create lakes, and connect otherwise isolated chambers. Some systems depend on drip water from above, bringing tiny amounts of organic material from the surface. Others are entirely sealed, surviving on resources generated within. To a scientist, water is the bloodstream of subterranean ecosystems, carrying life where light cannot. Oxygen is another critical factor. Caves and deep subsurface zones often have low oxygen, and life must adapt. Many subterranean animals develop slow metabolisms, requiring little energy. Microbes shift to anaerobic processes, surviving without oxygen at all. In some places, methane becomes the main energy source, and entire microbial communities live on nothing else. These adaptations show how flexible life can be, bending its rules to fit environments that would kill most surface species. The organisms themselves fall into categories. There are trogloxines, creatures that visit caves, but cannot survive there permanently, like bats that roost by day but hunt outside at night. There are troglophiles, creatures that can live both above and below ground, moving between worlds as conditions allow. And then there are troglobites, specialists that spend their entire lives underground. These are the most striking. Blind fish, albino salamanders, insects with long antennae to feel their way through darkness. Evolution shapes them over time, stripping away unnecessary traits and sharpening others. In caves cut off for millions of years, troglobites become so unique that scientists call them living fossils, windows into how isolation sculpts life. The stability of subterranean ecosystems is another remarkable feature. On the surface, ecosystems fluctuate with seasons, storms, droughts, and fire. Underground, temperatures are almost constant, humidity is steady, and change happens slowly. This stability allows life to persist in delicate balance. Populations may be small, but they endure for astonishing spans of time. In the deep biosphere, microbes reproduce so slowly that entire communities seem frozen in time, ticking forward on scales we can hardly comprehend. This stability also makes subterranean ecosystems vulnerable. Because they are finely balanced, any disruption, a change in water chemistry, the introduction of a foreign species, pollution from the surface, can cause collapse. In this sense, they are both resilient and fragile, enduring for eons, yet sensitive to sudden shifts. Scientists studying these systems often describe them as analogues for alien worlds. Because they do not depend on sunlight, they resemble what we might expect on planets without bright stars or on moons beneath icy crusts. Europa, Enceladus, and Titan in our own solar system are prime candidates. If life exists there, it might resemble the microbes and specialized creatures we find in Earth's caves. In this way, the science of subterranean ecosystems reaches beyond our planet, giving clues about what life might look like elsewhere. What makes this science so relevant to our question is that it demonstrates every essential component of survival. Underground is already accounted for. Energy sources exist without the sun. Food webs can form from microbes upward. Water cycles carry resources through hidden veins. Oxygen is not always necessary, and life adapts in surprising ways when it is scarce. Stability allows for continuity across unimaginable spans of time. If microbes and fish can do it, humans with technology and cooperation could potentially build upon the same foundations. But the science also reveals limitations. Productivity underground is usually low. Food webs are thinner, populations smaller. Without sunlight, energy is harder to come by, so systems tend to be sparse. This suggests that if humans lived underground, their societies would likely be smaller, tightly regulated, and deeply dependent on resource management. Abundance would be rare. Balance would be everything. The study of subterranean ecosystems has another lesson too. Cooperation is essential. Microbes form symbiotic relationships, sharing resources and functions. Animals adapt to niches, avoiding wasteful competition. Ecosystems underground work because every part is finely tuned to every other. A human society underground would need to mirror this, organising itself around strict cooperation rather than unchecked growth. And perhaps the most profound lesson is that life underground is invisible but immense. We walk across the surface every day without realising that beneath us are layers upon layers of thriving systems. The science tells us that the Earth is not solid stone but a living body, its veins carrying water, its tissues alive with microbes, its hollows home to creatures we never see. In thinking about subterranean ecosystems, we are reminded that the underground is not barren. It is not empty. It is a vast network of life, slow and strange, but real. And if we take it seriously, then the question of underground civilization shifts. It is no longer a question of whether life could exist. It is a question of how it might organize itself, drawing on the same rules that nature has been using for billions of years. And that leads us naturally to wonder about people, about what our own species would need to build and endure in such a world, and whether the lessons of microbes and fish and blind salamanders could become the lessons of human survival in stone and shadow. To imagine a civilization beneath the earth, not just surviving for a short time but truly living, we have to think about what people would actually need. Not the romantic image of vast glowing caverns and secret kingdoms, but the day-to-day necessities of human survival. Because myths can paint pictures of hidden utopias, but in reality life requires food, water, shelter, light, air, and a way to hold communities together. If any of those are missing, no amount of legend can make the underground sustainable. The most immediate need is air. On the surface, we take it for granted. Underground, air is more fragile. Caves can trap carbon dioxide, fires can consume oxygen, and without circulation, the atmosphere quickly becomes unbreathable. So any society underground would need reliable ventilation. Natural cracks and fissures can carry air in and out, but humans would likely have to expand those passages, building shafts that allow gases to escape. Some ancient mines had surprisingly sophisticated systems for this, using the natural movement of warm and cool air to keep tunnels ventilated. For an entire community, that knowledge would be even more critical. Next comes water. No human group lasts long without it. Fortunately, underground systems are rich in water sources. Aquifers stretch beneath continents, rivers carve through stone, and pools collect from dripping ceilings. But not all water underground is safe. Minerals, sulfur, or bacteria can contaminate it. People would need methods of filtration, boiling, or using certain types of stone to purify what they drank. And since water flow underground can be seasonal or unpredictable, storage would be essential. Cisterns carved from stone, perhaps lined with clay, could hold reserves against droughts. Food is where things become most challenging. On the surface, agriculture relies on sunlight, and large animals graze on fields. Underground, neither is available. So what then? Mushrooms provide one solution. They grow in darkness, feeding on decayed organic matter. Early underground dwellers could cultivate them deliberately, perhaps learning to spread spores on compost heaps. Insects provide another. Crickets or beetles can be bred on scraps, and though unappealing to many of us now, they provide rich protein. Fish in subterranean rivers could be caught, and over time, selectively bred to suit human needs. Small mammals adapted to caves might also be domesticated, though that would require generations of patience. Beyond that, trade with the surface might have been necessary. Even if a society wanted to remain hidden, occasional forays upward to gather plants, seeds, or animals might have been unavoidable. This doesn't make the idea less plausible. Many myths of underground civilizations speak of them sending envoys or wanderers to the surface. Perhaps what sounded like legend was partly the memory of practical exchanges. Light is another need, though maybe not in the way we first think. Humans don't require constant light to live, but they do need it to work, cook, build, and feel oriented. Torches provide a short-term solution, though smoke becomes an issue. Oil lamps, if they discovered a way to extract or render fuel, might have been more efficient. Natural solutions exist too. Bioluminescent fungi, insects, or fish can give faint light. Even if weak, such sources could be cultivated in large numbers. Imagine caverns glowing with colonies of luminous mushrooms, providing just enough light to navigate. Not bright daylight, but a steady glow that made life possible. Shelter would be perhaps the simplest requirement, since caves already provide walls and roofs, but making them livable would take effort. Floors would need to be levelled, dampness managed, and fire controlled. Some chambers might flood, others collapse, so choosing safe spaces would matter. And as communities grew, people would have to carve new tunnels, expand chambers, and build supports. Ancient miners were already capable of these feats, so it isn't hard to picture underground societies learning to shape their environments into homes, halls, and communal spaces. Sanitation is another detail often overlooked. Waste, if not managed, would poison the air and water, so systems for removing or repurposing it would be necessary. Composting could turn organic waste into material for mushrooms or insects. Latrines could be placed where underground streams would carry waste away. Without such systems, no group could last long. But beyond physical needs, humans require something else: community and culture. People do not survive on calories and air alone. They need cooperation, rules, rituals, and stories to give meaning to life. Underground, this need would be amplified. In a world of darkness and silence, shared songs, myths, and traditions would bind people together. Ceremonies around fire or glowing fungi could become the centre of social life. Stories of ancestors, heroes, or gods might serve not only to explain their world, but to make it feel livable. Time would be another challenge. Without sunlight, people lose track of days. Experiments have shown that in caves, sleep cycles drift. Some people settle into 25 or 26-hour days. Others lose track entirely. So an underground civilization would need ways of keeping time. Perhaps water clocks, perhaps routines marked by communal meals or rituals. Even today, isolated groups like submariners use artificial schedules to maintain order. Without such anchors, life becomes disorienting. Psychology cannot be ignored. Humans crave light, space, and variety. Underground, monotony might weigh heavily. But communities can adapt. Art carved into walls, music echoing through tunnels, or festivals centered around glowing chambers could bring color into the darkness. And over generations, what feels like deprivation to us might feel like normalcy to them. Children raised in caves would not miss the sky they had never seen. Instead, they would find beauty in the textures of stone, the rhythm of dripping water, the shimmer of crystals. Safety from predators would be another concern. Caves are not empty. Snakes, bats, insects, and even large animals sometimes dwell there. Early humans or civilizations underground would have to defend themselves. Fire helps keep many creatures away, as does noise and presence. In time, societies might push deeper into isolated areas where large predators never reach, carving spaces that belonged only to them. Resources for tools and building would also matter. Stone, of course, would be plentiful. Bones from animals, wood from occasional forays to the surface, or even crystals and metals from mining could provide what they needed. Underground, minerals are abundant. A civilization could mine iron, copper, or other materials to craft tools. This could even give them an advantage over surface societies, if they learned to work with ores hidden beneath while others remained dependent on surface materials. So when we ask what people would need to survive underground, the list is long but not impossible. Air, water, food, light, shelter, sanitation, culture, time, safety, and resources. None of these are beyond human capacity. Some are harder than others, but history shows that people adapt to extreme environments. Deserts, Arctic tundra, high mountains. Each seems inhospitable until people figure out how to bend it to their needs. The underground would be another such challenge. And perhaps what matters most is not whether each of these needs could be met, but whether they could be balanced. Underground societies would live on a knife's edge, where one mistake in water, air, or food might collapse the whole system. This might explain why myths describe underground civilizations as disciplined, enlightened, or advanced. To survive below, you would have to be. Chaos would destroy you. Balance would preserve you. So, yes, it is possible. The science of caves, the history of human ingenuity, and the resilience of life itself all suggest it could work. It would not look like our surface civilization, sprawling and abundant. It would be smaller, stricter, more careful. But it would be real, a society shaped by stone and silence, thriving in a world without sky. And once we imagine that, the question grows larger. Not just what people would need, but how they would arrange their lives, how they would build homes, how they would shape their world into something livable and meaningful. Because survival is only the beginning. Civilization is more than endurance. It is architecture, culture, and imagination. When we think about building a life underground, perhaps the hardest part to picture is how people would provide themselves with food, water, and energy. On the surface, these things are everywhere. Rain falls from the sky, rivers run across the land, crops grow in fields, animals graze on grass. The sun itself pours out energy each morning, free and abundant, the quiet engine behind all life as we know it. Underground, none of that is obvious. No sun, no open rivers, no fields of wheat stretching out to the horizon. Yet, if we look closer, we find that each of these essentials has its counterpart in the depths. Harder to manage perhaps, but not impossible. Begin with food. For most of human history, food has been tied to sunlight. Plants capture light, animals eat the plants, and we eat both. Remove the sun, and that familiar cycle collapses. But underground, other cycles exist. Fungi thrive in darkness, breaking down matter into nutrients. Mushrooms can be cultivated deliberately, fed with compost, wood, or even dung. In some cultures on the surface, mushrooms were already prized sources of food, so it isn't hard to imagine an underground society leaning on them as a staple. Insects provide another path. Crickets, beetles, and mealworms grow quickly, eat little, and provide rich protein. While modern tastes may resist the idea, many cultures around the world have relied on insects for nutrition. Underground, such a system would make even more sense. Easy to breed, easy to feed, and perfectly adapted to small dark spaces. And underground people might consider insects as ordinary as we consider bread or rice. Fish also live underground. Blind cavefish are found in rivers and lakes sealed off from the surface. Some societies could have caught these fish and learned to manage their populations. With time, they might even domesticate them, creating ponds or channels where fish could be raised intentionally. This would provide not just protein but fat, essential for survival in a diet otherwise limited to mushrooms and insects. Animals would be harder, but not impossible. Small mammals like rats or rabbits, if introduced underground, could adapt. Generations of selective breeding might turn them into useful livestock. Perhaps goats or sheep were once brought down to provide milk and meat. We don't know, but the principle is simple. Wherever people go, they find ways to bring food with them, to bend the environment to sustain them. Then there are plants, and here the question is tricky. Most plants require sunlight, but some can grow in very low light, or with substitutes. If underground people discovered glowing fungi or managed to capture bioluminescent organisms, perhaps they could nurture small plants. More realistically, they might build systems that relied on trade, occasionally gathering seeds or grains from the surface. Myths often speak of underground dwellers who interact with the surface world only rarely, as if they emerged to collect something precious. Maybe food was one reason why. So food, though difficult, has solutions. Not the abundance of the surface, but enough to endure. Mushrooms, insects, fish, small animals, occasional plants, and clever management. Water, meanwhile, is actually more plentiful underground than many imagine. Aquifers stretch like hidden oceans below us, vast reserves trapped in stone. Caves often contain rivers and lakes slowly fed by rain filtering from above. Drip water can be collected, and with proper storage it can last through dry periods. The challenge is not availability, but purity. Some underground water is rich in minerals, even poisonous. Sulfur springs, iron-rich pools, or stagnant water could make people sick. So filtration would be essential. Sand, charcoal, or even certain types of stone can filter water. Boiling provides another solution if fuel is available. Underground, people would have learned by trial and error which sources to trust. Another issue is transportation. Rivers underground can be narrow or dangerous, so carrying water to communities would require containers, channels, or cisterns. Clay, stone, or even animal skins could be used. In some myths, underground cities are described as being built around great lakes or rivers, as though proximity to water was the deciding factor for settlement. This makes sense. Water dictates where people live, above or below. Energy is perhaps the most fascinating puzzle. On the surface, energy comes from the sun, from wind, from flowing rivers. Underground, none of these apply. So what then could a civilization rely on? The most obvious answer is fire. Wood carried from the surface, or peat, or coal if they learn to extract it, could provide heat and light. Fire is dangerous in enclosed spaces, but with ventilation systems it can be managed. Beyond fire, there are subtler sources. Bioluminescence could provide light, though not strong enough for heavy work. Glowing fungi or insects could create atmosphere, orientation, and even ritual significance. Geothermal energy might play a role too. Underground, heat seeps from the Earth's core. Hot springs, steam vents, or warm rock could provide natural heating. Some societies might have learned to use these, channeling steam to cook food or warm chambers. And then there is human energy. In the absence of abundant resources, people themselves become the engines. Muscle power, organised into routines, can grind grain, pump water, or carry supplies. In an underground society, cooperation would not just be social but mechanical. Many hands working together to replace the absent energy of the sun. Imagine, for example, a great hall lit by faintly glowing fungi with people gathered to share food of mushrooms, fish and insects, drinking from cisterns filled by dripping water, warmed by stone that holds geothermal heat. Above them, unseen, the sun shines for other societies. But below, life continues, self-sustaining, fragile yet enduring. Of course, survival underground would never be easy. Food supplies would need constant management. Water systems would need protection from contamination. Energy would always be limited. But humans are problem solvers, and the myths of underground civilizations suggest they were imagined as disciplined, careful, and wise precisely because those traits would be necessary. Waste, greed, or recklessness would destroy them. Balance, patience, and cooperation would keep them alive. So when we think of food, water, and energy without the sky, the question becomes not whether they are possible, but how carefully they can be sustained. The underground is stingy. It offers little abundance, but it does offer enough. And sometimes, enough is all that is required for life to persist. And once those basics are secured, people can begin to build culture, architecture, and stories. Once bellies are full and thirst is quenched, once warmth keeps out the chill, imagination flourishes. Food, water, and energy are the foundation. What rises from them is everything else that makes a civilization. If people truly lived beneath the surface, one of the first things they would have to decide is how to shape their spaces. Caves provide natural shelter, but they are rarely comfortable. Floors are uneven, ceilings drip, walls close in at odd angles. A family might endure such a space for a season, but a civilization requires something more deliberate. So the story of an underground people would also be the story of architecture, of how they carved homes of stone and silence into livable places. Stone is unforgiving, but it is also patient. Unlike wood, it does not rot quickly. Unlike mud, it does not wash away with rain. To work with stone is to think in centuries rather than seasons. For underground societies, this permanence would be both gift and challenge. Tools would wear down. Labour would be immense. But once a chamber was carved, it could last for generations. Whole families could be born and die in the same hollow, leaving marks on the walls as their only trace. The first structures might have been simple adjustments, smoothing a floor so people could sleep more comfortably, piling stones to create a hearth for fire, digging shallow drains so water dripping from the ceiling did not flood a chamber. Over time, these adjustments would grow more ambitious. Tunnels straightened, rooms expanded, niches carved into walls for storage. Even the act of sitting together might encourage builders to widen a chamber, creating gathering spaces that could hold dozens at once. Ventilation would guide architecture as much as comfort. Without careful design, smoke would suffocate people, so shafts would have to be carved, slanted in ways that drew air upward. Passages might be oriented to encourage drafts, letting fresh air flow while stale air escaped. Some ancient mines already display such sophistication, suggesting that even without modern science, people knew how to coax air through stone. Sound, too, would shape underground spaces. In a cave, sound echoes strangely. A whisper can carry farther than expected. For a community, this could be either a blessing or a burden. Walls might be thickened to quiet sleeping areas. Communal halls might be carved where acoustics made songs and speeches carry beautifully. Perhaps rituals were designed with this in mind. Chants and drums echoing through stone to create a sense of power and belonging. Light would be precious, and architecture would adapt to it. Chambers near entrances might be used for daily work, taking advantage of what little natural light filters in. Deeper spaces, lit only by torches or glowing fungi, would be reserved for storage, rest, or ritual. Niches in walls could hold lamps. Ceilings might be darkened with soot, absorbing smoke and preventing reflections that irritated eyes. Over time, people would learn how to place light sources to balance brightness and shadow, turning darkness into something manageable rather than oppressive. As communities grew, organisation would become necessary. Families might cluster around central halls, their living spaces branching like roots from a main stem. Shared facilities, cisterns, storerooms, meeting chambers would anchor the design. Paths would be widened to allow travel, walls marked to guide the way. Underground architecture often resembles labyrinths, but for those who live in them, they are maps of memory. Every twist and corner becomes familiar, named, and woven into story. Safety from collapse would be another concern. Unsupported ceilings can fall, crushing everything beneath, so pillars would be left standing, natural stone left in place as ribs to hold the weight. Some cultures might even carve pillars deliberately, shaping them into symbolic forms, animals, ancestors, gods, turning necessity into art. In this way, architecture underground would merge function and meaning. Water management would be central. Chambers prone to flooding might be abandoned or repurposed as cisterns. Channels could be cut into floors to divert water towards storage pools. Dripstone formations might even be integrated into design, their steady flow becoming a feature rather than a nuisance. To live underground is to live with water as constant companion, and architecture would reflect that. Heat, or its absence, would also matter. Stone is slow to change temperature, so deep chambers remain cool even in summer. Fires would warm central areas, but insulation might require walls of clay, woven mats, or animal skins hung across openings. In especially deep places where geothermal heat seeps upward, architecture might even take advantage of warm stone floors, using them as natural hearths. As the society matured, architecture could become increasingly symbolic. Just as cathedrals on the surface reached upward toward heaven, underground halls might be carved downward or inward as gestures of connection to the earth itself. Spirals, domes, or vast vaulted chambers might serve not only practical needs but spiritual ones. Art would cover the walls, paintings, carvings, etchings that told stories of ancestors, myths, or daily life. Each mark would be a way of softening stone, of turning it into something human. Storage, too, would drive design. Grain, dried mushrooms, or preserved meat would need to be kept safe from dampness and pests. Sealed alcoves might be carved high in walls, accessible only by ladders. Pits might be dug and lined with clay to hold reserves. The architecture of survival is often invisible. Not grand halls, but the careful, practical spaces where food, water, and tools are safeguarded. Communication would also shape construction. Long tunnels can disorient. Without markers, it is easy to become lost. So walls might be carved with symbols, lines pointing toward water, spirals leading to central halls, handprints marking family areas. These are more than decorations. They are maps, guides, and warnings. The architecture itself becomes a language, passed from one generation to the next. And perhaps most fascinating is the silence. Above ground, the world is filled with constant noise, wind, birds, rivers, storms. Underground, silence dominates. Every sound becomes significant. Architecture in such a world would be designed not only for space, but for sound. The way footsteps carry, the way voices echo, the way a drip of water punctuates quiet. These would all be felt deeply. Walls might be carved to absorb sound where privacy was needed, or shaped to amplify it where gatherings took place. Silence itself becomes part of the building material. Over generations, these spaces would become more than shelters. They would become cities in stone. Not cities like ours with towers and streets, but networks of chambers and tunnels, layered and connected, organic yet purposeful. To walk through them would be to walk through the memory of a people, every wall bearing marks of labour, belief and adaptation. And in imagining this, we realise that underground architecture is not only possible but inevitable. Once people decide to stay below, the environment demands it. Caves alone cannot sustain. They must be shaped, expanded, maintained. And in that shaping, culture emerges. A home is never just stone. It is the rhythm of life embedded in stone. So when we picture homes of stone and silence, we picture more than walls. We picture the hum of a community, the glow of faint lights, the steady drip of water, the warmth of a fire shielded by careful vents. We picture people carving not just for survival, but for belonging, turning the underground into a world of their own making. And when all the practical needs are met, when air flows, water is stored, food is protected, and halls echo with voices, the next question becomes how these people would connect with one another. Because architecture provides the space, but communication provides the society. And underground, without stars or horizons, communication itself would become something different, something shaped by the closeness of stone and the endlessness of darkness. When we imagine people living beneath the surface, we often think about what they would eat, how they would build their homes, or where their water might come from. But another question runs quietly beneath all of these, and it may be just as important. How would they communicate in a world without stars? Because communication is not just about words or messages. It is about orientation, memory, cooperation, and identity. On the surface, we communicate through shared reference points. The rising sun tells us morning has come. The seasons mark the passing of time. Stars provide navigation. Birds, rivers, and wind carry signals that shape how we speak and how we imagine. Underground, all of those vanish. So how would people create systems of connection when the sky is gone? Start with sound. Underground, vision is limited. Light is rare and precious, so sound becomes central. The way a footstep echoes down a tunnel can tell you how wide it is, how close you are to a chamber, even if someone else is approaching. Voices carry far in caves, but they bend around corners, distorting words. So people would have to learn how to shape their speech, slower, clearer, with pauses that let echoes fade before the next thought. Entire dialects might form around the acoustics of stone. A surface visitor might find the speech of underground dwellers strangely paced, but within the caves it would be perfectly natural. Beyond spoken language, sound can be structured into signals. A struck stone, a hollow drum, a clap of hands, all can travel down tunnels. Different rhythms could carry different meanings: danger, welcome, gathering, or ritual. This is not guesswork. Many cultures on the surface use drums to send messages across distances, and caves would magnify that possibility. An underground community might develop a rich language of sound that allowed people to coordinate even when far apart in darkness. Whistles could serve a similar role. High-pitched tones travel differently through narrow passages, carrying farther than speech. Some shepherds on the surface already use whistle languages to communicate across valleys. Underground, such a system would be even more useful. A few notes could tell you who is coming, where water is found, or which direction to follow. Touch would also become a form of communication. When vision is scarce, the hand becomes a guide. Walls can be carved with textures, smooth for safe paths, rough for dangerous ones, spirals for gathering halls. Travellers could read these with their fingertips as easily as we read street signs. Families might leave unique marks, a series of lines or dots to claim a space as theirs. Communication through touch extends beyond walls. Handshakes, embraces, or the brushing of fingers could carry deep meaning in a place where faces are not always visible. Symbols would play a major role. Carved into stone, painted with minerals, or arranged with stacked rocks, they would serve as markers for direction, property, or belief. In caves around the world, prehistoric people left handprints, animals, and abstract patterns. These were not random. They were messages to others, expressions of identity, or ways of connecting across time. An underground civilization would likely expand this practice, turning every chamber into a canvas of communication. Light itself could become a signal. A torch waved in a certain pattern, a lamp covered and uncovered, a glowing fungus arranged in a circle. All could carry meaning. In darkness, the smallest light becomes significant. Entire systems of signals might evolve, like our use of lanterns at sea or smoke on mountain tops. Storytelling would be another essential tool. Without stars to mark the passage of seasons, without a horizon to remind people of direction, stories would hold the role of memory. Through stories, people would remember where water was found, which tunnels led to collapse, or how ancestors survived in hard times. These stories would not be entertainment alone. They would be practical maps and instruction manuals wrapped in narrative so they could be remembered and passed on. Song would expand this role. Music carries emotion, but also information. A song about a journey can include directions. A chant can mark the rhythm of work. A lullaby can encode cultural values. Underground, songs would echo through chambers, shared by many at once, reinforcing not only memory but unity. Time itself would be communicated differently. Without stars or sunlight, natural cues vanish. So time would have to be constructed socially. People would gather for meals, rituals, or tasks at agreed intervals. Bells, drums, or other signals might mark these divisions. Time becomes a matter of collective agreement, communicated constantly, reinforced by routine. Writing, if it developed, would have a different emphasis underground. Rather than paper or parchment, stone and clay would dominate. Inscriptions carved deep into walls would last centuries. Clay tablets could be baked near fire pits, preserving records. Symbols might evolve not only to mark language but to map space, turning architecture into text. The lack of stars changes more than navigation. It changes imagination. The sky provides metaphors, myths, and aspirations. Underground, communication would draw instead from stone, water, and silence. Stories might describe ancestors as rivers, or gods as glowing crystals. Metaphors would be tactile and auditory rather than celestial. When people spoke of destiny, they might speak of tunnels branching or chambers opening, not of stars guiding their way. Conflict and diplomacy would also rely on communication. In close quarters, misunderstandings could be dangerous. So systems of mediation, ritualized speech, or carefully structured debate might emerge. Perhaps communities used long pauses in speech to allow echoes to fade, preventing heated exchanges from turning chaotic. Silence itself might become part of communication, a respected space for thought and calm. Even the way people name themselves could be shaped by environment. In darkness, visual identity matters less. Names might be linked to sound, voices, rhythms, or songs. A person might be known for the way they tap a pattern on stone, or for the tone of their whistle. Families might pass down unique rhythms as signatures, recognizable in complete darkness. Imagine a society where meetings are held in large, echoing chambers. Leaders do not speak quickly, but slowly, letting each word settle. Listeners close their eyes, absorbing not just the content but the rhythm and weight of speech. Decisions are made not by loud voices drowning others, but by carefully measured exchanges, where silence is as meaningful as sound. This is not fantasy. It is adaptation, communication shaped by stone. Trade with the surface would complicate this. How would underground people signal to those above without exposing themselves? Perhaps through hidden shafts where sound could be sent upward. Perhaps through symbols carved on stones left at meeting places. Secrecy would matter. Communication would need to balance openness and protection. And then there is the question of memory across generations. Oral traditions would be strong, but inscriptions would anchor them. Marks carved into stone, repeated symbols, songs rehearsed by entire groups. These would ensure continuity. In a world without stars, where the sky does not remind you of eternity, permanence must be carved and sung. So when we think about communication underground, it is not limited to speech. It is sound, touch, light, symbol, story and ritual. It is the entire web of signals that allow humans to share space and meaning. The absence of stars removes one layer, but it does not silence humanity. If anything, it deepens the role of every other form of connection. And once communication is established, once people have found ways to make themselves heard and remembered in darkness, the next challenge arises. How does living in endless night shape the mind itself? Because architecture and communication solve physical and social needs, but psychology is another matter. What happens when generations grow up without ever seeing the sky, without knowing morning or evening, without feeling the sun on their faces? To survive underground is not just about finding food, storing water, or carving halls in stone. The greater challenge may be the mind. Humans evolved under the open sky, guided by light and shadow, warmed by the sun, cooled by the moon. Every instinct, every rhythm of our bodies is tuned to cycles of day and night. Remove those cycles, and the world of the mind begins to shift. So the psychology of endless night is not just an interesting side note. It may be the deciding factor in whether an underground civilization could endure for generations. Experiments on the surface already give us clues. When people are isolated in caves with no sunlight, their sense of time drifts. Some begin to sleep in cycles longer than 24 hours, drifting into 25 or 26. Others lose track altogether, sleeping when tired, waking when they feel like it, until their schedule no longer matches anything recognizable. Days stretch into weeks without shape. Without the sun, the body loses its anchor. Underground, people would have to invent new anchors, artificial rhythms to hold themselves together. But time is only one part. The absence of light itself has profound effects. Light is not just a way of seeing, it regulates hormones, moods, and sleep. Without it, depression and lethargy can grow. People lose energy, motivation, and joy. For an underground society, this could become a constant battle. How do you keep spirits alive in a world without dawn? One answer is artificial light, torches, lamps, glowing fungi, even reflections of polished stone could help. But another answer lies in culture. Music, ritual, art, and storytelling can act as emotional light, filling the void left by the absent sun. Silence, too, has psychological weight. Above ground, the world hums with sound, wind through trees, birds calling, rivers running. Underground, silence dominates, broken only by water drips, footsteps, or voices. Silence can soothe, but it can also oppress. Long enough, it becomes heavy, pressing on the mind. So underground people would need ways to fill silence with meaning. Songs sung in groups, chants echoing in halls, instruments carved from bone or stone. The sound would not just entertain, it would reassure, it would remind people they were not alone. Then there is space. Humans are used to horizons. The sight of distance calms us, gives perspective. Underground, walls are close, ceilings hang low. For some, this would feel secure, like being embraced. For others, it would feel suffocating, a constant pressure. Over generations, people might adapt. Children raised underground might find open spaces overwhelming rather than comforting. But still, the absence of horizons would shape psychology. Imagination might expand where vision contracts. People might dream of vast halls, gods of infinite chambers, or legends of hidden skies beneath the earth. Fear of the unknown would also be amplified. On the surface, danger often approaches from a distance, visible before it strikes. Underground, danger lurks around every corner. A tunnel might collapse. A predator might hide in shadows. Even another group of people could emerge suddenly from the dark. This uncertainty breeds vigilance, and vigilance, if constant, becomes anxiety. To manage this, underground communities would need trust and cooperation, shared rituals, mutual reliance, and clear systems of protection would help reduce fear. Isolation is another threat. Underground spaces can cut groups off from one another. A collapse might separate families for days or weeks. Loneliness in such an environment can be devastating. So communication systems, sounds, signals, rituals of gathering would be vital. Psychology thrives not just on safety but on connection. People need to know they belong, that others will come for them if danger strikes. Dreams themselves might shift. Sleep underground is different. No sunrise wakes you, no sunset reminds you to rest. Dreams might become longer, stranger, filled with imagery drawn from stone, water, and shadow. Myths could grow from these dreams, whole cosmologies born of subconscious efforts to make sense of endless night. Perhaps underground societies imagined gods not as figures in the sky, but as presences in the stone. Perhaps their underworld was not a metaphor, but a direct reflection of the only world they knew. Mental illness would be a real challenge. Depression, anxiety, and disorientation would threaten survival. But culture is medicine. Art, ritual, and social structure can protect the mind. Underground societies might create elaborate ceremonies around light, sound, and storytelling designed to maintain emotional balance. Fire festivals to mimic sunrise, chants to regulate group rhythm, stories to give hope and direction. There is also resilience to consider. Humans are adaptable. What feels unbearable to one generation can become normal to the next. Children raised underground would not miss the sun they never saw. Their world would be stone, water, and fire. Their minds would shape themselves to that reality. Imagination would fill gaps. Perhaps they would dream of glowing rivers, crystal heavens, or gods of eternal night. Their psychology would not be broken by absence. It would be remade by it. And yet, even with adaptation, the longing for the surface might linger. Some would dream of a light they had never seen. Myths might carry fragments of memory from ancestors who once lived above. Psychology is not only shaped by environment but by story. And stories of another world, brighter and freer, would pull at the mind. Some would treat it as myth, others as destiny. Either way, it would colour their sense of who they were. Discipline would likely be stronger underground. When survival depends on cooperation, rules tighten. Chaos cannot be afforded. Psychology under such pressure becomes more collective. Individuality is still there, but it bends toward the needs of the group. Rituals of obedience, respect, and order might become central, not because people are less human, but because the environment punishes disorder. Imagination would flourish in unique ways. Deprived of the sky, people might turn inward, finding vast universes in dreams, art, and story. Silence and darkness often spark creativity. Cave paintings from our ancestors prove this. In deep darkness, they painted animals, hands, and symbols, creating meaning where none was given. An underground civilization would do the same, not as luxury, but as necessity. Art becomes a stabilizer, a mirror for the mind. And then there is hope. Psychology needs hope as much as it needs food or water. Hope for survival, hope for tomorrow, hope for meaning. Underground, hope might take the form of legends about hidden skies deeper down, or prophecies about returning to the surface. Even if never fulfilled, such stories give direction. They keep despair at bay. So the psychology of endless night is not simple. It contains fear, depression, and longing, but also resilience, imagination, and adaptation. It is a double-edged world, fragile but full of potential. Underground, the mind would bend to survive, reshaping itself as surely as people reshape stone. And when minds adapt, when communities create rituals and culture to sustain themselves, the question becomes how they organise that culture. Because psychology is about individuals, but civilization is about groups. And in the endless night, groups would have to find ways to rule, to share, to live together without tearing themselves apart. When people gather in large numbers, rules emerge. Sometimes they are spoken, sometimes they are only understood, but they are always there. A family can live without them, but a civilization cannot. Survival underground would depend not only on food and water, not only on air and architecture, but on how people agree to live together. The stone itself would enforce certain laws. Space is limited, resources are fragile, mistakes are costly. But beyond those natural pressures, people would need to decide how to share, how to lead, and how to prevent chaos from tearing them apart. The first step toward organisation might have been necessity. In small groups, decisions are often made by consensus or by whoever shows the strongest personality. But underground, the margin for error is narrow. One person hoarding food, one family wasting water, one reckless fire could put everyone at risk. So leadership would be more than authority. It would be responsibility. Leaders might be chosen not for strength or wealth, but for wisdom, patience, and reliability. Those who could think carefully, who could balance needs fairly, would rise naturally. Elders would likely play a central role. In darkness, memory is survival. The older generation remembers which tunnels collapsed, which waters turned poisonous, which rituals kept people steady. Their authority would not only be respected, it would be vital. A society underground might have developed a council of elders, each voice carrying the weight of years. Decisions would not be rushed. Pauses would stretch, words weighed carefully. In a world of silence, wisdom is slow, and patience becomes law. Division of labour would also emerge quickly. Underground life does not allow for everyone to do everything. Some would manage water, checking cisterns and channels. Others would cultivate mushrooms, tend insects, or fish in hidden streams. Builders would carve new chambers, strengthen old ones. Guards would watch for predators, intruders, or signs of collapse. Storytellers, singers, and spiritual leaders would maintain morale. Specialization would not be luxury. It would be the glue that held the community together. Rules around resources would likely be strict. On the surface, abundance allows for waste, but underground, every scrap matters. Food would be rationed, water distributed according to need, energy carefully saved. Punishments for breaking these rules might be severe, not out of cruelty but out of necessity. To steal food underground is not just theft, it is endangering lives. Such societies might develop codes of fairness so ingrained that they feel sacred. Sharing becomes more than kindness, it becomes survival. Conflict, of course, would still exist. Humans argue, compete, and resent, no matter the environment. But underground, conflict cannot be allowed to fester. Walls are too close, voices too loud, lives too interdependent. So systems of resolution would have to be formal. Rituals of mediation, circles of dialogue, or decisions handed down by councils. Exile might be the harshest punishment, for to cast someone into deeper darkness without support would be worse than death. Religion or belief systems might intertwine deeply with organization. Leaders may not only govern but also guide spiritually, reinforcing rules with myth and ritual. Ceremonies around fire, water, or glowing fungi could remind people of their dependence on one another and on the environment. Moral codes might be framed as sacred obligations, not just practical ones. In this way, survival rules would become cultural laws, carried from generation to generation not as commands but as traditions. Trade and cooperation between groups would also matter. If multiple underground communities existed, how would they interact? Tunnels might connect different halls, rivers might run between them. Alliances could form, exchanging food, tools, or stories. But mistrust would be natural too. Secrecy protects survival. The balance between openness and isolation would shape politics. Perhaps rituals of trust evolved. Long greetings spoken slowly to prove identity, or symbolic gifts exchanged to show goodwill. Population control might be another necessity. In closed systems, growth without limit leads to disaster. Underground societies might establish customs that regulate family size, whether through delayed marriage, shared child rearing, or religious restrictions. Life underground would require balance, not only in resources but in numbers. Organisation would also extend to knowledge. Who remembers the safe tunnels? Who knows how to build supports? Who understands which fungi heal and which poison? Such knowledge cannot be hoarded. It must be taught, shared, and preserved. Education might be communal, with children learning from elders in groups, stories woven with practical lessons. Knowledge becomes collective property, another form of survival. Architecture itself would reflect organisation. Central halls for councils, smaller chambers for families, storage rooms protected by community guards, paths carefully mapped, doors or barriers marking boundaries. Space underground is not infinite, so every chamber must be accounted for. Organisation is literally carved into stone. Imagination might also shape governance. Myths could legitimize leaders, telling stories of ancestors chosen by gods or by the earth itself. Rituals of succession might involve symbolic journeys through tunnels, trials of patience, or demonstrations of wisdom. Leadership underground would not just be practical. It would be theatrical, reaffirming order through ceremony. Gender roles, too, might take unique forms. In many surface societies, roles were shaped by access to fields, hunting grounds, or warfare. Underground, the division might shift. Those skilled at navigating tunnels, calming disputes, or preserving resources could hold high status regardless of gender. Labour would be valued for survival, not for tradition. Who could carve stone? Who could heal? Who could guide? These would matter more than anything else. Defence from outsiders would shape politics as well. If underground societies feared discovery, secrecy would be a law unto itself. Children might be taught never to reveal their home to strangers. Tunnels might be hidden, entrances disguised. Guards might patrol the boundaries silently, ready to extinguish light at the first sign of intrusion. The politics of survival would be the politics of concealment. And yet, for all the discipline and strictness, there would also be space for celebration. Festivals, songs, and rituals give life meaning beyond survival. Communities might gather to honour water, to celebrate births, to mark harvests of fungi or fish. In those moments, organisation would loosen into joy, reminding people why they endure. Celebration is itself a form of governance, reinforcing unity through shared emotion. So how might civilization organise underground? It would be a blend of necessity and creativity, of strict rules and shared rituals. Elders guiding with memory, councils making slow, careful decisions, labour divided by skill, resources rationed with fairness, conflicts resolved through ritual, religion binding it all together, secrecy guarding the edges, and celebration giving it breath. What emerges is not a chaotic collection of survivors, but a disciplined, ordered, resilient people. Their rules may seem harsh to us, but to them they would be natural, the shape of life carved into stone. And once rules are in place, once survival is structured, another question opens. How would these underground people view the surface world? Would they see it as paradise, as danger, as myth, or as temptation? Because organisation is about order inside, but every order must also decide what lies outside. Technology does not always mean machines, engines, or electricity. It means the ways people bend their environment to survive. It means the tools they craft, the systems they invent, the clever shortcuts that turn weakness into strength. Above ground, technology grew in partnership with the sun, the wind, the open field, and the flowing river. Underground, it would grow in the absence of all of those things. So technology born from darkness would not look like ours. It would not rise in towers of glass or spread across fields of metal. It would be shaped by stone, water, silence, and the constant need to stretch resources as far as possible. Fire is the most obvious place to begin. Without sunlight, fire is both light and life. The first underground people who learned how to manage it would have transformed their world. Not just keeping warm, but cooking food, driving away predators, hardening clay, and giving themselves something more important than all of that, a rhythm. Fire marks time. The lighting of a flame signals beginning. Its fading marks an end. Underground, fire would become more than a tool. It would be a clock, a symbol, and a form of power in itself. But fire underground is dangerous. Smoke suffocates, heat builds, oxygen is consumed. So the technology of fire would not only be about making it, but controlling it. Ventilation shafts carved with precision, chambers designed to pull smoke upward, fuels chosen carefully to minimize choking fumes. Perhaps families passed down secret methods for fire management, songs that guided the tending of flames, stories that warned of disasters when it was misused. Fire technology in darkness would be less about spark and more about mastery. Lighting beyond fire would take on new forms. Glowing fungi exist on the surface, faint but steady. In caves, they could be cultivated, spread across walls to create a ghostly glow. Certain insects produce light, their bodies filled with natural lanterns. Perhaps underground people learned to keep them in containers, feeding them, breeding them, creating swarms of tiny lights that hovered like stars. Minerals, too, can reflect or even store faint light. Polished crystals, arranged in clever ways, might scatter a single flame into a chamber-wide glow. None of this would be bright like the sun, but underground brightness is relative. Even a flicker feels like brilliance in total dark. Tools would follow naturally. Stone is abundant underground, harder to shape than wood but more durable. Chisels, hammers and wedges would be refined over generations. Sharp edges for carving tunnels, flat edges for smoothing walls, small implements for delicate work like carving symbols or crafting ornaments. Bone could supplement where stone failed, light, flexible, and useful for needles, hooks, or points. Metals, if discovered, would change everything. Even small veins of copper or iron could revolutionize survival, allowing stronger tools, sharper weapons, sturdier supports. Mining is itself a form of underground technology, so perhaps such societies became natural metallurgists long before surface people did. Transportation in tunnels would demand innovation. Narrow passages prevent carts or wagons. So goods would be carried on backs, in baskets woven from roots or fibres carried down from the surface. Sleds might slide over smooth stone floors. Ropes, braided from hair or plant fibres, would haul heavy loads. In vertical shafts, pulley systems might emerge, simple at first but increasingly sophisticated. Imagine an underground chamber with ropes stretching upward, weights balanced, goods moving smoothly from one level to another, all powered by human muscle and careful design. Storage would be another crucial technology. In darkness, rot and dampness threatened supplies. So people would carve sealed chambers, line them with clay, and create systems of airflow to keep food dry. Mushrooms might be dried near fire pits, fish smoked slowly, grains stored in clay jars. Preservation techniques would become as important as production. Perhaps underground societies invented fermentation early, discovering that foods could last longer and taste richer when transformed by microbes. Fermentation not only preserves, but creates alcohol, and alcohol can act as medicine, ritual tool, or simply comfort in long winters of stone. Communication technology too would develop. Sound travels far underground, but uncontrolled it distorts. So underground people might have built resonant stones, carved in such a way that a strike carried a clear tone down a tunnel. Drums could be placed at intervals, their beats relayed from hall to hall. Marks on walls would serve as maps. Torches waved in patterns could signal across chambers. These are not the machines we think of today, but they are systems, carefully refined, shaped by generations of trial and error. Medicine would be born from darkness as well. Many fungi and minerals have medicinal properties. Some kill, others heal. Careful observation, carried from generation to generation, could produce a body of knowledge as deep as any surface herbalism. Poultices made from moss, infusions from roots carried below, or mineral scrapes dissolved in water, all could treat illness and injury. Underground societies might revere healers, those who could read the silent language of fungi and stone. Energy beyond fire might also be tapped. Underground rivers can turn wheels. Even if crude, water-driven mills could grind grain, pump water, or power simple tools. Geothermal heat could be harnessed too. Steam rising from vents might be trapped, used to cook food or warm chambers. These technologies would not look like engines or turbines. They would look like stone basins, carved channels, carefully placed stones guiding the flow of heat and water. Simple, but revolutionary for those who lived there. Clothing and materials would show ingenuity as well. Animal skins brought from the surface could be used, but underground societies would need more sustainable options. Fungi like mycelium can form tough, leathery sheets. Woven fibres carried from above might be blended with underground plants to create textiles. Perhaps even insect silk was cultivated, producing threads as strong as those of spiders. In a world where warmth and durability matter more than beauty, clothing would be functional first, symbolic second. Art, surprisingly, is technology too. Carving pigments from minerals, grinding them into powders, mixing them with fat or water to create paint. This is chemistry as much as expression. Instruments carved from stone or bone, strings stretched from gut or fibre, drums tuned by the echo of chambers, all represent technological thinking. Underground societies would not abandon beauty. They would refine it, turning their limited resources into expressions of memory and hope. We should not underestimate how creative people can be when pressed. Our ancestors on the surface invented bows, boats, and houses with little more than stone, wood, and fibre. Underground, the same minds would face different challenges but produce equally inventive answers. Darkness does not kill technology, it reshapes it. And if an underground civilization endured long enough, their technology might even surpass ours in certain ways. We rely on abundance, fields of crops, endless sunlight, oceans of trade. They would rely on precision, careful recycling, total use of every resource, balance maintained without waste. In an age of scarcity, their methods might look wiser than ours. Technology born from darkness would not shine in the same way as ours. It would not rise above the earth in monuments visible for miles. It would whisper through stone, glow faintly in fungi, echo in signals carried through tunnels. It would be humble, invisible, yet no less profound. Because technology is not about how loud or bright it is. It is about how perfectly it fits the needs of its people. And once those technologies existed, once fire was mastered, tools refined, storage secured, and communication steady, the question would naturally arise. Would such a civilization remain content in darkness, or would their tools one day point upward, toward the surface, toward the stars they had never seen? If a civilization was born in darkness, raised among stone walls and silent rivers, the question would eventually emerge, even if only in whispers. Would they ever look upward again? Would they remain content to carve their lives in silence, or would curiosity, memory, and longing push them back toward the surface? For a people who had never seen the sun, it might not be a matter of returning, but of imagining. The surface could be myth as much as geography, a story of a world too vast, too bright, too dangerous to be real. But human beings are not creatures who stay still forever. Something in us always wonders what lies beyond the boundary we know. For the first generations underground, survival would silence these questions. Carving homes, securing food, managing fire and water, building rules and traditions, these tasks would consume every thought. But as stability grew, as children were born who knew only stone, the imagination would stir. Songs might emerge about hidden skies, gods of fire rising each day, or a place where water falls from above instead of dripping from rock. These stories would keep alive a sense that there was something beyond the ceiling. Elders, if they remembered the surface, might tell stories of it. But memories warp. What begins as a practical description, trees, rivers, fields of grain, might shift into legend. Trees become pillars of the heavens, rivers become endless snakes of water. The sun becomes not a burning star, but a god whose face cannot be seen. Children raised on such stories might not believe them literally, but they would carry a spark of possibility, a sense that something beyond the stone world exists. Exploration would follow naturally. Humans explore because we must. Even underground, some would wander into uncharted tunnels, driven by curiosity as much as by hunger. Some would vanish, swallowed by collapse or predators. Others would return with new chambers, new rivers, or new dangers mapped into memory. And sometimes, just sometimes, one of those tunnels might slope upward. Even if blocked, even if faint, the idea of an upward path would become a seed planted in the mind. But upward would not only mean physical direction, it would mean aspiration. An underground people might build myths about upward journeys, heroes who climb through endless tunnels to reach a world of light, ancestors who return to the stars. Perhaps even rituals where young people symbolically ascend chambers, each higher than the last until they emerge into a chamber filled with firelight meant to mimic the sun. Upward becomes more than a location. It becomes hope. The dangers of the surface would also be feared. If ancestors fled below because of disaster, storms, famine, enemies, the stories of those dangers would echo for centuries. The surface would be painted as a place of chaos, where exposure kills and enemies hunt. The underground would be safe, protected, sacred. In such a culture, to dream of upward might even be forbidden. Curiosity could be framed as betrayal. The ceiling becomes not only stone but law. And yet, repression cannot silence imagination forever. Forbidden ideas are often the most tempting. A child who asks what lies above, a singer who weaves songs of light, a dreamer who swears they saw visions of the sun. These voices might be small, but they would not vanish. They would be carried from generation to generation, waiting for a time when survival was stable enough to allow risk. Technology would play a role too. As underground societies grew skilled in carving, preserving, and managing resources, they might eventually gain the means to explore further upward. Tools strong enough to dig, methods to support collapsing shafts, ways to carry air and water farther than before. What begins as myth becomes project. Exploration becomes planned rather than accidental. The psychological pull of the unknown is powerful. We know this from our own history. People have crossed deserts, oceans, and even the void of space, not because they needed to, but because they wanted to know. Underground, the surface would be their cosmos, the unreachable frontier. Even if dangerous, even if unnecessary, some would risk everything for a glimpse. What would happen if they succeeded? Imagine a person who has never seen the sky standing at the mouth of a cave as dawn breaks. The flood of light would be overwhelming, painful even. Their eyes would close, their skin recoil, but slowly they would adapt, and what they saw would defy every story told underground. The vastness of the horizon, the infinite scatter of stars, the warmth of the sun. It might be terrifying, even maddening, but it would also be revelation. Such a discovery would change everything. The stories told for centuries would suddenly be confirmed or shattered. The elders' authority might be challenged. Religion might splinter, some declaring the surface sacred, others branding it forbidden. Entire communities might divide between those who wish to rise and those who cling to the safety of stone. Upheaval would ripple through every hall. But discovery need not mean abandonment. An underground civilization might treat the surface as another realm, a place visited only for ritual, trade, or vision quests. Young people might be sent upward as a test of courage, returning with stories of sky and stars. The surface could be woven into culture without replacing the underground way of life. Still, once the door is opened, it cannot be fully closed. Even if most people remained below, the knowledge that another world exists above would gnaw at them. Questions would grow. Why live without sunlight when it is there? Why starve in stone when fields stretch across the surface? Hope would become pressure. Pressure would become change. And yet perhaps not all would feel it. Perhaps many would resist, preferring the known to the unknown. The surface may be vast, but it is unpredictable. Storms, predators, enemies, scarcity. These are real risks. Underground is harsh, but it is controlled. People might cling to control rather than gamble on freedom. So the question of whether they would ever look upward again has no simple answer. Some would not. And between them would stretch tension, conflict, and compromise. The story of an underground people would not be a story of one path, but of many. Curiosity and fear, memory and myth, hope and caution, all pulling against one another like threads woven into stone. And if we look at ourselves, we see the same pattern. We live under a sky filled with stars, yet we dream of leaving it for space. Some call it destiny, others call it madness, and still, ships are built, rockets launched, risks taken. Maybe the question of upward is universal. Maybe every people, whether under the sky or beneath the ground, carries the same seed of curiosity. And when we imagine them gazing upward, dreaming of what lies beyond, we also imagine what would happen if they went farther. Not just to the surface, but beyond even that. Because once you take one step upward, you begin to wonder how many more there might be. When we picture an underground civilization, we often imagine it as something hidden in the present or waiting to emerge in the future. But what if it was something older than us? What if they were here before us? The idea unsettles because it reshapes the story we tell about ourselves. We like to believe humanity is the first and greatest intelligence on Earth, that our story begins at the surface, in open plains, under the sun. But what if another story began before ours, in silence and darkness, carved into stone long before we walked upright? Our science tells us that civilizations rise with agriculture, that farming fields under the sky gave birth to cities, writing, trade, and culture. But is that the only path? Mushrooms can be cultivated in darkness. Insects and fish can be bred in underground streams. Minerals can be shaped into tools. A people living in caves, if organised and inventive, might have built something we would recognise as civilization long before wheat was planted in fields. If they existed, their traces would be hard to find. Stone preserves little of daily life. Wood rots, fabric decays, fire leaves only ash. Even the walls they carved could be mistaken for natural formations unless we knew how to read them. And if they lived far below, in chambers we have not yet reached, their world could remain untouched for tens of thousands of years. Legends might carry faint echoes, faint myths of hidden realms, forgotten peoples, or wise ancestors who taught us skills we claimed as our own. The stories of Shambhala, Agartha, or the Hollow Earth might not be literal maps, but memories blurred across time. Cultures across the world tell of people who came from below, who emerged from caves or rose from underworlds to shape the surface. Perhaps these stories are not pure imagination. Perhaps they are fragments of encounters with something older. If they came before us, the question is why they vanished. Maybe they did not vanish at all. Maybe they remained underground, content with the stability of their world while we rose above to claim the surface. Or perhaps disaster struck. Flooding tunnels, poisoned air, collapses that forced survivors to emerge into a world they were not prepared for. Those who made it might have mingled with early humans, passing along fragments of knowledge before their identity dissolved into ours. Imagine if fire-making, tool refinement, or even early myths were not our inventions, but gifts left behind by people of the dark. It is not impossible. Much of what we call progress is shared, borrowed, inherited, and reinvented. If another intelligence lived here before us, their fingerprints might already be hidden within our own culture, invisible because we assume they are ours. Psychologically, the idea challenges us. We are used to being at the top of the story, but if another people existed first, then we are not pioneers but successors. We are not alone in the story of Earth, but part of a chain, maybe one link in a much longer sequence of rises and falls. It makes us ask whether our dominance is permanent or temporary, whether another intelligence might follow us as we followed them. Science fiction explores this constantly. Stories of ancient civilizations buried beneath planets, ruins holding secrets older than humanity, knowledge waiting in forgotten tunnels. But these are not only stories. Archaeology has shown again and again that history is deeper than we think. Lost cities under sand, civilizations erased by climate shifts, cultures that flourished and vanished long before our textbooks imagined them. If this can happen on the surface, why not below it? The technology of such a people would not resemble ours. It would be adapted to darkness, shaped by necessity. They may have mastered ventilation, water systems, fungal cultivation, and stone carving in ways we cannot match even today. What seems simple to us may have been perfected to a degree that made their lives sustainable for millennia. Survival in such an environment requires discipline, balance, and ingenuity. If they managed that balance, they might have thrived for far longer than our brief 10,000 years of recorded history. And then there is the possibility of contact. If they were here first, did they ever meet us? Perhaps early humans stumbled upon their tunnels, mistook them for gods or spirits, learned from them, feared them. Perhaps stories of dwarves, trolls, or other subterranean beings are memories of real encounters. Exaggeration adds fangs and magic, but beneath the layers of myth could lie something older and stranger. Meetings between our ancestors and people who had lived in the dark for ages. The silence of evidence does not erase the possibility. Most of human history is invisible in the record. Most of Earth's history hides more than it reveals. Stone swallows traces, water washes them away, time erases more than it preserves. Absence of proof is not proof of absence. And if they were here before us, it raises another unsettling thought. What if they are still here? Not gone, not vanished, but simply content to remain hidden, deep in places we cannot reach. We like to think we have mapped the Earth, but most of it remains unseen. The oceans are vast mysteries. The crust itself is largely unknown. Entire cave systems stretch for miles, uncharted, waiting. It is not impossible that life, even intelligent life, continues in silence where we cannot see. If that were true, what would it mean for us? Would they see us as children, reckless and noisy, squandering resources they preserved carefully? Would they pity us, envy us, fear us, or ignore us? Would they reveal themselves or choose to watch quietly as they always have? And for us, the revelation that we were not first would shake the foundations of our self-image. Religions would be questioned, science would be humbled, culture would be rewritten. To know that another people shaped this world before us would change how we see ourselves. Perhaps it would make us more cautious, more respectful. Or perhaps it would drive us to compete, to prove we are greater. But the truth, if it exists, may never be known. We may never find traces strong enough to prove they were here. The silence of stone may hold its secrets forever. Still, the question matters, because it reminds us that history is not a straight line. It is a web of possibilities, some visible, some hidden. And the story of Earth is far longer and stranger than the short span we have lived on its surface. To ask if they were here before us is to ask whether we are unique or only temporary, whether we are the first storytellers or just the latest voices in an older song. And when that question lingers, it naturally leads to another. If they left traces, where might we find them? If they still exist, what signs would betray their presence? If the underground hides the memory of people before us, what evidence could we search for in the cracks and shadows of our world? If we allow ourselves to wonder whether another civilization once lived beneath the surface, or perhaps still does, the next question follows naturally. What signs would they leave behind? What clues might be hidden in our world waiting for us to notice? Stone does not give up its secrets easily, but nothing can exist without leaving some trace. Every fire leaves ash. Every tool leaves marks. Every voice leaves echoes if you know how to listen. Some of the most obvious places to look are caves themselves. When our own ancestors painted on walls, carved symbols or left tools behind, they preserved glimpses of their lives for tens of thousands of years. If another people had lived in similar spaces far earlier or deeper below, they might have done the same. Lines in the stone that look like cracks could, on closer inspection, be deliberate carvings. Chambers that seem natural might have been shaped by hands long forgotten. Sometimes archaeologists already debate whether strange formations are natural or artificial, whether a wall smoothed in the dark is the result of water or of tools. It is possible that some of these arguments are really about traces left by someone else, long before us. Artifacts are another possibility, though they would be rare. Stone tools can survive, but they are often overlooked. A chisel, a hammer, or a wedge buried deep in sediment could easily be mistaken for ordinary rock. Unless someone knows exactly what to look for, entire collections of tools could lie unrecognized in caves, mislabeled or ignored. More delicate materials, wood, fabric, bone, would decay. Metal might corrode into nothing, so we should not expect golden crowns or glowing machines. We should expect subtlety, scratches on walls, soot in ceilings, small piles of stone arranged too neatly to be chance. Stories themselves are a kind of evidence. Cultures across the world tell of beings who come from below. Some myths speak of ancestors emerging from caves at the beginning of time. Others describe hidden people who taught agriculture, medicine, or metalwork before vanishing again into the ground. We call them myths because we cannot verify them, but myths often preserve echoes of truth. When distant cultures share similar stories, it suggests something more than coincidence. Perhaps these are cultural memories of contact with a people who lived where sunlight never reached. Geological anomalies could be clues as well. Vast tunnel systems exist, some stretching for miles with levels and chambers that look almost too precise to be purely natural. Scientists often explain them with water flow, lava tubes, or erosion. Yet sometimes their symmetry is uncanny. A shaft too straight, a chamber too smooth, a pattern of branching tunnels that looks planned rather than random. If people once carved homes in the deep, erosion may have blurred their work, but hints of design could remain, hidden in plain sight. There are also unexplained artifacts found far from where they should be. Reports exist of objects discovered in mines, strange spheres, tools or carvings buried so deep in rock that they should predate humanity itself. Many of these claims are dismissed as mistakes or hoaxes, and perhaps most are. But even if 1 in 1,000 is real, it suggests we are not the first to shape stone. Biological signs might offer another path. If an underground civilization cultivated fungi, insects, or animals in isolation for thousands of years, traces of those domesticated species might still exist. A mushroom that thrives only in deep caves, an insect that seems oddly adapted to human-like conditions, a fish that shows signs of selective breeding. These could be living fossils of a culture that shaped them long ago. Science might call them anomalies of evolution, but perhaps they are remnants of deliberate human effort in darkness. Architecture is another clue we may already have seen. Some ancient sites on the surface show tunnel systems beneath them. Vast networks of passageways stretch under old temples, cities, or fortresses. Archaeologists usually explain them as storage, escape routes, or water systems. But what if they are older than the structures above? What if ancient builders found tunnels already there and simply built atop them? In that case, some of our oldest monuments may stand on the bones of even older civilizations whose homes lie beneath. Language may hold traces too. Words for underworld, people below, or hidden dwellers appear in many unrelated languages. Symbols carved into rock sometimes resemble eyes, spirals, or stairways leading down. These might not just be metaphors for death or mystery. They might be inherited memories of real people below, encoded into culture long after direct contact faded. We should also consider the possibility of active concealment. If an underground civilization survived into times we recognize, they may have worked to erase their traces. Entrances could be sealed, tools hidden, fires carefully managed to avoid leaving marks. Secrecy itself would be a survival strategy. The fewer signs they left, the safer they were from discovery. If so, the clues we find may not be what they left accidentally, but what they failed to erase completely. Sound might carry hints too. Caves and tunnels often produce strange echoes, whispers, or hums. Geologists explain them as natural resonances, wind currents, or dripping water. But what if some of those sounds are remnants of deliberate design? Tunnels carved to carry voices or signals might still sing their notes long after the people who carved them are gone. Science gives us tools to search, but science also has limits. When archaeologists dig, they often focus on layers that fit their timeline of human history. Anything that does not fit is set aside. Anomalies are often dismissed rather than explored. But the record of the Earth is vast, and perhaps we have only read the surface of the story. So what signs and clues might be hidden in our world? They may be subtle, fragile, or buried too deep for us to find. They may be stories we dismiss, tools we overlook, tunnels we mistake for natural. But the possibility that they exist at all reminds us that history is not finished. That beneath our feet may lie not only stone but memory, not only silence but evidence of lives as real as ours. And if evidence does exist, it invites another question. Why do these stories continue to capture our imagination even when proof is scarce? Why do we keep searching for hidden worlds, for people who may or may not have lived below us? Perhaps the answer lies less in stone and more in ourselves, in the way imagination reaches for mysteries we cannot quite solve, and in the way hidden worlds reflect something about our own. For all the stories of hidden worlds, ancient tunnels, and civilizations that may have thrived beneath our feet, one question lingers. Why does this idea still capture our imagination? Why do we return to it again and again, in myths, in books, in films, in quiet conversations at night? There is something in the image of a people living below us that refuses to let go. Part of it is fear. The underground has always carried unease. Caves swallow light. Tunnels close around us. The deeper we go, the more we feel the weight of the earth above pressing down, reminding us how small we are. When we imagine a civilization beneath us, we are not only imagining neighbours. We're imagining being watched from below, our world less secure than it seems. That fear taps into something ancient. The knowledge that predators lurked in caves, that the dark was never truly safe. Stories of hidden people keep that fear alive, reshaped into myth. But fear is only part of it. There is fascination too. The underground is mystery, and mystery pulls at us. A door half open is more compelling than a door wide open. The idea of chambers stretching endlessly below, of entire cities hidden in stone, invites the mind to wander. What would they look like? What would they eat? What songs would they sing? The unknown is fertile ground for imagination, and the underground is perhaps the greatest unknown of all, existing beneath our everyday steps, unseen but always there. Imagination also loves inversion. We live in light, so we imagine life in dark. We walk under open skies, so we dream of enclosed tunnels. We depend on the sun, so we ask whether life could thrive without it. The underground civilization is the mirror image of ourselves, and in that mirror we see both what we are and what we might be if circumstances had been different. It allows us to ask how flexible life is, how many forms survival could take, how many paths civilization could walk. There's also a sense of humility in these stories. If others were here before us, or still live beside us, then we are not alone at the centre of history. We are part of something larger, a sequence of lives and worlds that overlap and intertwine. The thought unsettles, but it also fascinates. It reminds us that the story of Earth is bigger than us, that we might not be the final word. These stories also satisfy a longing for hidden depth. In a world where satellites map every street, where images of the planet are only a click away, mystery feels endangered. But the underground resists. We cannot see through stone. Vast cave systems remain unexplored. The idea that something important, something secret, might still be there is comforting in its own way. It means not everything has been discovered, not every question answered. Hidden worlds reassure us that mystery is still alive. Myth keeps them alive as well. Generations have told stories of hidden realms, from Shambhala to Agartha, from the Greek underworld to the Hopi emergence myths. These tales linger because they are retold, reshaped, and embedded into culture. Children hear them and carry them forward. Writers adapt them. Films dramatize them. Every retelling keeps the spark alive. Over time, they become less about proof and more about resonance. We tell them because they feel meaningful, because they say something about our fears, our hopes, and our place in the world. The underground civilization also speaks to a deeper psychological need, the wish that we are not alone. On the surface, loneliness is answered by community. In the cosmos, loneliness is answered by imagining aliens. But beneath us, the loneliness of history is answered by imagining predecessors or neighbours. If another civilization thrived below, then our story is richer, our company larger, our world less empty. The thought fills a silence we otherwise cannot. Another reason lies in the way hidden civilizations reflect our anxieties about ourselves. When we imagine people who live underground, careful with resources, disciplined in survival, we're also imagining what we're not. We waste. We expand without limit. We consume recklessly. The underground civilization is a kind of moral mirror, showing us a version of humanity that learned restraint because it had no choice. The story fascinates because it whispers a lesson. This is how you must live when there is no abundance, but it can also reflect the opposite. Sometimes we imagine underground dwellers as twisted, secretive, or monstrous. They hoard, they deceive, they plot. In those stories, they embody what we fear about ourselves, the parts of humanity that thrive in shadows, the instincts we repress but know are there. In this way, the story is not about them at all. It is about us, our virtues and our vices, externalized into a people below. There is also the adventure of it. Stories of hidden worlds promise discovery. Who among us has not wished to stumble upon a hidden door, a forgotten stairway, a cave that leads to something extraordinary. The underground civilization is the ultimate hidden door. It suggests that adventure is not only in distant lands or outer space, but right here, under our feet, waiting. And perhaps most of all, these stories endure because they are adaptable. They can be hopeful, fearful, spiritual, or scientific. They can appear in ancient myth or modern fiction. They can be metaphors for death, symbols of the unconscious, or literal speculations about survival in stone. They fit whatever lens we place on them. That flexibility keeps them alive. A story that can only be told one way dies quickly. A story that can be retold in countless ways endures forever. So why does this story still capture our imagination? Because it offers fear, fascination, humility, mystery, comfort, reflection, and adventure all at once. Because it asks us to look beneath the surface of the earth, of ourselves, of history, and wonder what lies hidden. Because it reminds us that no matter how much we discover, there is always more to imagine. And from there, the thought naturally follows. If the story still matters to us, if it still lives in our myths and our imaginations, how do we bring it to a close when we tell it aloud? How do we step back from the dark and gently return to the surface, carrying the wonder without losing the calm? The answer lies in the way we end, not with certainty or proof, but with a soft return, a closing of the tunnel that leaves mystery intact. We have wandered through shadows for a long while, tracing the idea of a civilization born in darkness, a people who might have built homes of stone, cultivated life without sunlight, and carried stories that still echo in our myths. We have followed them through questions of survival, technology, memory and imagination, always circling around the same wonder. What if the first civilization lived underground? And now, as the story bends toward its end, there is the quiet task of closing the tunnel, of returning gently to the surface without rushing, without breaking the spell, without locking away the mystery too tightly. When we leave a cave in real life, the change is slow. At first, there is only blackness, then a faint shimmer of light, then shadows take shape. The air shifts, carrying scents of soil and grass. Our eyes adjust and we realise the outside has been waiting all along. Ending this story is like that. We're not shutting a door so much as letting the light seep back in, letting the imagination linger even as we step into familiar ground. The thought of hidden civilizations reminds us of something important about ourselves. We are creatures of curiosity. We dig, we search, we imagine. We create stories where none may exist, and sometimes those stories point us toward truths we had not seen before. Perhaps no civilization ever thrived in eternal night. Perhaps it's only a tale born of fear and fascination. But the act of asking, the act of wondering is itself valuable. It keeps mystery alive in a world that often feels stripped bare by knowledge. And mystery is not the enemy of science or reason. It is their companion. Every discovery begins as a question, a possibility that sounds impossible until it is not. Once people thought life could not exist in deep oceans without sunlight. Then we found ecosystems thriving on heat and chemicals. Once people thought no city could exist without rivers or fields. Then we built skyscrapers that drink water from pipes and import food from across the globe. Again and again, what we once thought impossible proves only to be unexplored. So when we ask whether civilizations might have lived underground, we are not abandoning reason. We are extending it into the dark, asking it to illuminate places we have not yet looked. There is also something deeply human in imagining life below. The underground is not only a place of fear, it is also shelter. In storms, in wars, in heat and cold, caves have offered protection. Miners descend for work. Archaeologists dig for history. Children crawl into basements during thunder. The underground is part of us, not separate. When we imagine people who never left it, we're imagining an alternate version of ourselves, one that chose to stay in safety, one that built a home where the surface felt too dangerous. The The story of hidden civilizations also gives us a way to reflect on our own world. If survival in darkness required balance, restraint and cooperation, then perhaps the lesson is that we too must learn these things. Our world above is bright and open, but resources are not infinite. The people of the dark, real or imagined, become a mirror reminding us that endurance is not about endless expansion, but about harmony. Whether they existed or not, their imagined wisdom has value, and yet, it is not only lessons we carry from the tunnel, it is also wonder. Wonder that perhaps somewhere, something still waits. Unexplored caves stretch for miles. The Earth's crust is full of silence and secrets. We may never find signs of another civilization, but we will keep searching, if not with shovels, then with stories. Because stories are our way of keeping the unknown alive, of making the dark less empty. Closing the tunnel does not mean sealing it. It means stepping back, allowing it to remain open in our minds. Perhaps tomorrow someone will read an old myth differently, or notice carvings on a cave wall that look too deliberate, or wonder why certain tunnels are too straight to be natural. Perhaps one day science will stumble upon something that shifts the story from imagination to evidence. Or perhaps it will never happen, and that is all right too. Sometimes the value of a story is not in its proof, but in its persistence. So here, as the story winds down, it is time to return gently to the surface. The air grows warmer, the shadows grow thinner, the steps echo less and less until they vanish altogether. The ceiling lifts, and sky returns. The imagination does not close but follows us, whispering in the back of the mind, reminding us that mystery is never fully gone. Thank you for walking through this journey, for sitting with the questions rather than rushing for answers, for letting the dark breathe and the silence speak. If you found comfort in the exploration, if you enjoyed the calm of it, consider staying with this community, returning for more reflections like this one. And as always, wherever you are, whatever time it is for you, may you find rest. May you carry a little wonder with you, and may the questions linger just enough to make tomorrow feel a little more mysterious than today.